yours that's not terrible.
Oh, that Chinese.
Lordy, yeah. So crazy. Oh, you really like it?
Yeah.
Oh. That's funny. Depending on when you went. Depending on who was owning it at the time. Well, good morning, everyone. According to my clock, it's 11:30. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the pre-commission portion of our meeting today. I do not have a report to share today. So we'll just move into general housekeeping items. Are there any general issues commissioners would like to bring up or schedule for a future discussion?
Madam President, I just
Hansen?
am looking forward to the policy retreat on Friday. I spent a lot of time going through the 1000s as instructed, and I gave you guys some ideas, which I hope everybody else has some ideas too, because I don't want it just to be some ideas, but I think we can make some tweaks to a number of those sections, and I'm excited about that. I'll send out some specific language ideas to you probably tomorrow.
Thanks,
so you guys can read it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll have some handouts from the various partners that we've heard from in our advisory committees. So I'll have that all handy for each of you to have to reference on Friday. Thanks.
Yeah, and a lot of people are encouraging us because they said, thank you, I really appreciate you doing this dive. And I assured them, we're not going to get into every single policy, but we'll have a place to park it and deal with all their various policy ideas. So appreciate that.
Thanks, Commissioner. Are there any questions about items on today's agenda?
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
just a little while ago, half hour ago, so I sent out a message with a couple of questions on some consent agenda items. I don't know if now's the time to talk about that or at the beginning of our regular meeting. In any case, with regard to item number 4 on the consent agenda, I am satisfied with the information that's been provided on that. Just for future reference, I'm wondering when we have parcels and approvals of parcel acquisition and so on, or sale, it would be helpful if the report gave us some graphics. Usually they do, but in this case there wasn't a graphic showing the size and location of the parcel, and that was very helpful in this case. It was a parcel something like 30 feet, 35 feet wide, along several hundred feet of street frontage along an arterial, which, I look at that and that clearly, I believe, justifies the cost and so on. So that information is very helpful. Likewise, I had to dig a little to find the size of the parcel in the report. It would be better if that information were upfront. Item number 2, the tree pruning change order. I have to admit, it's a kind of an astonishing change, representing a 10-fold increase in the number of trees in that zone since 2015. And while that sort of thing is entirely possible, it would be helpful to see some information on that. Director Wong showed me the manual showing the count of the trees, and as a commissioner, I'm not in a position to go out and double check that and count that, so I'm going to have to rely upon this information. But admittedly, it's a kind of a dramatic change, and perhaps there could be steps we can take in the future so that that sort of thing gets noticed earlier instead of being hit with a bigger change after the fact. So I feel like my question on item number 2 has at least been addressed based on the information that I've seen from the staff. So I'm not going to request that it be removed from the consent agenda. And I want to thank Director Wong and staff for providing that information.
Thanks for your thoughts and questions, Commissioner McKinney. Noted. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Question with regards to the Hanley Place Bridge. I looked on Hunt and App and everything else, trying to figure out what a huge project this was for over $1 million. And it looks like a pretty small project to replace that bridge. I was remembering back a few years to the two large bridges of this type that were replaced on Victory and Amity, close to our roundabouts, just to the east. And I don't know how many people would remember that. But these were two large projects for that size of a canal, and they cost $1 million for the two of them. I mean, that's just pretty recent. And so I'm just shaking my head that a little thing like this costs so much money.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, absolutely great question. This is kind of unique in its sense that we also are building the temporary bypass to make this happen. We have looked at the dollars, so that adds a lot more to the cost of the project.
What is the bypass?
It's giving the residents an opportunity to get to their homes while we are taking apart the bridge. So we have to build this part of it as a temporary operation for them while we fix the safety issues on their bridge. We did go
just get them hotel rooms. Just kidding.
We did look at the cost again. This is in line with what we're seeing right now for costs across the board. But you are not the first commissioner to inquire about the bridge.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments on today's agenda? All right, Director, over to you.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. Again, good morning. I have sort of a different sort of presentations for you today. We have a series. In effect, and Madam President, with your concurrence, if we get close to your start time, what I'd like to do is hold maybe one of the presentations till after you're done with public communications, and then before the work session on the back to continue on. So first off, I'd like to give you a quick update on the Emerald Bridge project. Across the board, as you know, this is about a $1.5 million project. We're adding sidewalks to the area to produce for better access for pedestrians, safer access for pedestrians and bikes. We're also working with ITD to put railing over the bridge. This is now with ITD. They're looking at that. Our designs are basically done. We do have to get their concurrence. The biggest cost associated with this $1.5 million would be traffic control, because they're gonna have to shut down the interstate to do the railings on the bridge. So I'll keep you posted as we move forward on this. But that's basically what we're doing.
Director,
yes, Madam President.
So in terms of shutting down the interstate, do you have any initial estimations around how much time that's going to be, or how extensive this railing is?
Madam President, thank you for the question. No, not yet, but as soon as ITD gives us their final review, that'll be in that process, and I'll make sure the commission knows.
Thank you.
Madam President and Director, can we get a copy of the design, since you said it's pretty much done?
Sure. I'll make sure that
and just post it so we can get some input from those people who are there. I don't know if we need a work session on it, but I know this is such a critical thing for the connectivity of the walking and biking in that area. So I think design, the earliest we can look at and scrutinize the proposed design would be the better.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, yes, of course, and we have worked this with the groups that are most associated with this project. They're well aware and very happy that we are doing this as quickly as we can. Right. With that, I would like to let you know that as we go forward, we have 3 presentations for you. First off, I'm going to ask Jennifer to come up and give you an update on our pilot project for the auto pothole finder, give you a status on where that's at. Then I'm going to ask Jennifer and Ryan to come up and give you an update on all of our forward progress on our 3 new facilities, as to where they are, time frames, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to ask Jennifer and Ryan to continue, probably after the meeting, to give you an update on our NPDES next strategies moving forward on that. So with that, Jennifer?
Good morning. Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Jennifer Behringer, Deputy Director of Maintenance. Thank you for this opportunity to update you on an initiative we introduced in August of 2022. The City Rover system is an automated, road-based incident detection tool that uses artificial intelligence to identify issues. In a more simplified explanation, it's a dashboard-mounted pothole detector system. The vision of City Rover equipment is this. Imagine a world where citizens would not report any issues because they would already be fixed. So this is how it works. Camera, it's actually a cell phone that they've provided, and the camera on the cell phone is mounted to the dashboard. Data is collected while ACHD vehicles drive their day-to-day routes. The camera takes high-resolution images and includes the size and depth estimates, GPS coordinates, nearest address, direction of travel, and date and time. That data is consolidated into a dashboard for the crew chief to assess and then approve or reject the tagged pothole. Decisions are based on objective data. Service requests are generated automatically. Crews are directed by point-by-point navigation with routes built for efficiency, and service levels are tracked and measured. We were excited to try the system out and install the City Rover demo units on 6 ACHD pickup trucks from multiple departments. We leveraged the vehicles that drive the most miles throughout the county to get the biggest result. These were not only our 3 grade crew chiefs in maintenance, but also a zone inspector, a sub-inspector, and traffic ops supervisor. In the 5 months we had the equipment, the algorithm has detected over 1,400 potential potholes. As a note, last year we filled 3,200, so it's a significant number of potholes that it's detected, potential potholes. Once the algorithm tags a pothole, the grade crew chief goes into the application and accepts or rejects the tags based on their assessment from the photo. Once a pothole is accepted, the system creates a work order and the patch crew heads out to address the pothole. When analyzing the data, of those 1,400 potential potholes the algorithm tagged, we were disappointed to see only about 15% of them were potholes that deemed needing action. Our crew chiefs spend anywhere from 2 to 5 hours a week on average reviewing the incidents, approving and rejecting, and verifying the data and creating work orders. Our monthly metrics have shown a direct correlation between the additional potholes identified by the City Rover pothole detector and the number of potholes filled over the past 5 months, with over 200 additional potholes during this time period over last year's stats. There is not, however, a discernible correlation in the data to substantiate that the self-identification of the potholes reduced citizen complaints, since the overall increase in potholes filled over the past month was more than those identified by the City Rover. So basically 200 more this time compared to last year, 176 of those were identified by the City Rover detector. So there's still more that have been identified by the citizens this year over last year. So the question on the table is whether this system is worth adding to our toolbox going forward. The price for 1 unit is $5,214 a year, or a discounted $4,266 per year with a 3-year contract. If we assume the 3-year contract and continue with only the 6 vehicles we are currently demoing the system on, the budgetary impact is over $25,500 a year. I think to get the best bang for the buck, we would want it on more than 6 vehicles, so the cost would be exceptionally more than $25,000 a year. This is an exciting use of technology to help us do our jobs better, but while we see promise in this system, in its current state, we do not see enough benefit to ACHD or the taxpayers based on the price we would pay. We'll continue to touch base with City Rover, and as we see the technology progress and the price point come down, perhaps we can do another demo in the future to reassess. Madam President, Commissioners, thank you again for giving us the opportunity to try new and innovative ideas. I will stand for any questions.
Madam President?
Thank you, Jennifer. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, I've been waiting eagerly for this report.
Yeah.
And I think you're correct in your assumption. I can't imagine myself, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, you get all these hundreds, maybe thousands of potential pothole reports, and then a lot of them you have to inspect visually, correct?
Yeah, a lot of them will have to be inspected in person.
That's a lot of man hours, time and money that, we're doing pretty darn good with our potholes,
We
the
are.
way we do it, I know. So appreciate your synopsis and conclusion.
Yeah, Jennifer, I just want to say thank you for looking into it, bringing this to us to consider, and then your report after. I mean, I think we're very eager to see what other tools we can do to make things efficient and serve our population better. And that means trying new things that might not turn out. So I really appreciate your leadership on this. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioners, thank you. Next, I'd like to have Ryan and Jennifer give you an update on the 3 facilities that are in progress as we speak.
Madam President, Commission, I was thinking Jen and I needed to like high five as we come up here because we're going to go back and forth a few times here. For the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services, here with Jen, who you just visited with. Just wanted to briefly give you an update on our future facilities. First and foremost, we want to thank the Commission for your support. The goal of this is to provide the appropriate facilities to meet the needs now and into the future for our maintenance and traffic operations so that we can serve the public. Really maintaining the system and operating the system are 2 of the 3 legs that really make the system work for all the users. Just a couple key takeaways. We're on a little bit different schedule, but all moving towards the same direction of completion. The Franklin Traffic Operations Center is nearing completion of design. We'll show you some images and things out of that today. We expect to submit for building permit by March 17th, with expected completion of the facility by summer of 2024. You will have an item before you, I believe, next week to approve procurement of the pre-engineered metal buildings. There's about a year lead time on that, so we want to get those ordered as soon as we can. And so we'll have that item before you. That was bid by our CMGC, and we'll have some details on that. For the Houston Apple maintenance yards, they're in the process of initiating design with expected completion about a little over a year from now. And then that construction would be phased over a 5-year period. Introducing the Franklin Traffic Operations Center. This would be the view as you come in off of Franklin, with the front building there being the site for about 45 staff that are currently located in about 2 or 3 different locations, depending on how you calculate it. Our traffic operations crews, which are currently located across the street in the Adams yards. Our congestion management team, which has some building, and then some also across the street, as well as our lab, our construction lab, which is currently located here, but is definitely a smaller location here than they would be able to achieve at this new site. This would be the outside and the general idea there. The site will have 4 different buildings. The front up along Franklin, which is there on your right. The Traffic Operations Center will be the main location where staff will be seated. We'll have a shop where we can do construction of new signals, of signal hardware. It's where we will maintain our paint equipment. Currently, it's done in a very tiny garage where the staff has to take apart and rebuild the paint trucks each year. So we'll have equipment there to allow them to do that inside. We'll have a warehouse where we'll store all of our paint inside and not outside. We'll have it, that's where our signs will be, as well as other, all of our traffic signal equipment will able to be within that warehouse. We'll have some parking for vehicles in the back, as well as a small warehouse for the storage of our telehandler, which is the one that lifts the big heavy mast arms and signal poles, which will also be stored there in the back of the site. We do currently already have a stormwater basin in the back that will be updating to meet the current standards, as well as we've provided through the design process dedicated an easement along the back that could be used for future rails with trails, as that backs against the rail line and as they're able to secure future easements that could be used for that. Just to quickly look at the interior, these are some of the facilities. We'll have a substantial break room for the team. We'll have locations for our congestion management offices as well as the TMC. Will be built so that we can accommodate and manage that into the future. There will also be a location for a situation room connected to that TMC where emergency operations could work out of as needed. As it looks a little bit bland in color at this point in time because we're awaiting the outcome of the branding effort, so there'll be some additional colors mixed into that. But there will be staff there at front desk, and we'll be able to continue to serve the public in allowing tours and other things while keeping the operations going. Just as, again, in summary, there are 4 new buildings, the Traffic Operations Center, shop, warehouse, small warehouse. Really, this brings it up to current, to standards for our team. As I walk around our traffic ops, you can definitely see the dating of the facilities there, and we have staff that comes in and has, in some places, fold-up tables as their desks. So we're excited to provide adequate facilities for this team and really give them a place that they can operate well into the future and enough space to be able to accomplish that. This also will remove the TMC out of the floodplain. That's always a risk that comes up every time we get higher waterways, that emergency service that we provide through our traffic management center is currently sitting in that floodplain. And so trying to get that out of that, we'll place it there. It's also will be pretty close to our Franklin Yard. Estimated cost is, we have there 25 million, just got an update late last night. It'll be between 25 and 26 million is the most current estimate we have from our construction manager who's overseeing that part of the process. With that, I'll hand it over to Jen.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about USTIC and then Apple Maintenance Yards. We're on the front end of design right now, so we're still I think we have one more meeting to go on our concept discussions with the architect. We are designing USTIC and Apple Yards at the same time, so we're leveraging the similarity of function for all of the buildings. So we're kind of getting the twofer on the design. And then the site-specific design layouts will come later, where we might have to adapt some of the building sizes just based on what we have to work with. The timeline for each yard is really going to be dependent on the planning and zoning approval, since they're going to different cities. So you can see our timeline right now. We're in that programming and verification planning, which should go through the whole design process basically through until April, and then 30% schematic design in August. And then at that point, it goes to the cities, and however long it takes for Boise and Meridian to do their P&Z reviews, that kind of then informs the rest of the schedule. 100% construction documents will be spring of 2024, hopefully for both yards. As a reminder, the image that you see on the right there, that was what we brought to City of Meridian. So that was the original concept. As we've been working with the architect, some of these, the layout of the buildings might change a little bit. We're working with the city, and where the floodplain kind of comes in, has changed some of that. So I don't have the new drawings yet, but we'll bring those to you when we get on that design as well. What I did want to highlight on this is somewhat of what the buildings are going to look like. The upper one is our broom shed, where we're planning for putting the sweepers in 3 deep, and then across by 5, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7. 7 across, so planning for 21, but then expansion capability. So when they lay it out in the yard, the buildings aren't going to be crammed next to each other. We're going to leave some footprint for future growth if we need to. So we're not going to build huge and hope that we get there sometime in the future. We're going to build slightly more than what we need right now, with potential for expansion in the future as we continue to grow 20 years down the road. The salt shed at this location is going to be a hard structure, mostly enclosed, so it'll protect those materials as well. We have 23.7 acres at our Ustick site. Summary of improvements. We're planning all the buildings for all maintenance roles. So right now we have some roles, like our sweepers are just here at Adams, and then we have vegetation and our drainage crew out at Cloverdale. The plan for both the Ustick and the Apple site are to have all of the functions, having that capability at each of those locations. Just because as we're growing so much, getting those pieces of equipment and those crews closer to where the work is being done is going to improve that timeliness. The other benefits, we're going to, like I said, build to an immediate need, plus a little bit, and then preserve footprint for future growth. As you know, with the Ustick yard, a lot of growth in that direction. So this yard is pretty critical to being able to handle all of that additional growth out in that side of the county. Estimated cost, you'll see, is $25 million. So that's kind of an early estimate based on what we had given to the architect on the size of the buildings. So this was their estimated cost. I think as we look at how things are developing at the Franklin yard and the cost of materials, I do anticipate this will probably be updated once they finish all of the design thoughts and finish kind of the initial concepts of the buildings for us. So we'll continue to keep you apprised of that. And then the plan, again, we said construction over a certain number of years. Once we really identify what each of the buildings is going to cost, we're going to kind of phase all that out. Put together what vehicles we still need to procure, what the personnel and staffing hiring process is looking like. As you know, we're still kind of coming out of that pandemic hiring, so still a little struggle there. So all of that's going to be phased, and the costs, we're going to try and keep it as reasonable chunks of cost as we move forward. Moving over to the Apple yard, you'll see the buildings that I pasted on here are pretty much the same because they are being developed under the same concept of thought. And the layout that you see on the right-hand side of the screen really is just our concept. The architect hasn't even had a chance to put that onto paper yet. So we'll get there eventually. The Apple yard has 16 acres. That is larger than our Adams site right now. So it does give us that growth that we need. The concept for the Apple yard, I don't know, that is a pointer. Up on the north end, this is where Federal Way is. This would be where the admin building is, Fleet Shop, kind of on the frontage there. And then the bulk of our, here, I can do it over here. And then the bulk of, so this would be the admin building, Fleet Shop, and then the bulk of operations would be pushed back away from the Franklin yard. It's kind of nice. There's also the railway here, and we're investigating whether or not a rail spur makes sense at this site as well. Summary of improvements, literally a cut and paste from the previous slide. All the same buildings are being planned simultaneously. The one difference between the two yards that I didn't really highlight is that the Ustick yard is going to have above ground fuel tanks because of the floodplain, whereas Apple Street will have those fuel tanks below ground. And then the benefit is the maintenance coverage for growth to the east, and then of course the dialogue we've been having about Adams yard as well. Estimated cost is the same, $25 million, just based on our size of the buildings and the estimate. So I wanted to update this phasing strategy. This was one that you've seen in the past. Slight additions and changes just because of the realities of the timeline and design and getting everything through the cities. We'd be looking at Franklin Yard is on target for their FY24 completion and full operations moving, probably toward the end of 2024. I'll remind you with our Ustick site that the road widening is a significant player in our timeline as well. So they're in design right now and starting to go into the right-of-way procurement this year. And then the plan still is construction in 24-25. If that all stays on target, then the idea of allowing us to start our operations at that U-Stick yard is really predicated on when the construction for that widening is going to be completed. So the U-Stick yard, this is where we are right now in the design review. We've been working with City of Meridian on the walking path. We also have, it's probably better if I just use the pointer on the, and then everybody can see what I'm pointing at. Yeah, so this is where we are right now. City of Meridian, working with them on the walking path that's going to be on the north end of the U-Stick yard. And then we anticipate starting construction probably in 2024. And that's when you're going to get a bulk of things completed in there. Kind of a 2-year is when we're going to really try and target most of the buildings. So the intent would be able to, after the construction in 25, start our operations out there in 2026. Unless they allow us to start putting some of our materials out there, that would be of benefit too. But we'll ask for that when we get a little bit closer to that timeline, if it's something that we need or not. Apple Street is on a very similar timeline for those operations. And then Adams Street Yard, we talked about the Reed Street alignment and traffic ops relocating in 2024. And then we can start some of our relocation of the maintenance functions and materials as we can. So these 2 years, 25 and 26, are really going to be critical for where are we in the development and what does that mean for relocating some of our functions. And that is all I have. So as a summary, the Franklin Yard should be reaching their completion in summer of 2024. And we'll have our design of the U-Stick and Apple maintenance yards in May of 2024, and then building out in 2028, 29 maybe.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. I have a couple questions.
Yes.
So, for those of us that were on the commission when we all went to Meridian to hear about the U-Stick yard, some of their biggest asks in my mind as we're in this next, we're looking at architecture, right, and all of that sort of thing. How are things going with like the fencing for that U-Stick yard and like those components and like the design and all of those elements?
Yeah, we're all still on the very front end of it, but we'll be meeting all of those desires from the City of Meridian. I did want to mention that the design for the Franklin Yard, he showed that, we're going to be mimicking those same looks. So that really does meet, I think, the intent of what Meridian wants for what it looks like on the U-Stick frontage. Plus, overall, we'll have these 3 new facilities that will all have very much the same look. So it kind of helps with that identity. And
that was going to be my next question, because, it doesn't really matter where we are. We want to make sure that we have a really great presence and really great buildings that we can be proud of. So that's fantastic news. And then I know I mentioned this last year, but in terms of the admin buildings and any like landscaping, I want to make sure that we're doing like xeriscape or energy efficiencies wherever we can, and making sure that that's part of the design.
Yeah, Madam President, Commission, we have taken that into account as we've worked through the design of this process. For the Franklin Yard, just some of the details, we are using the most current green building code in terms of the structures itself. We've incorporated, we have pavers in the parking area to accommodate and with lighter colored pavers is the plan so that they have that higher albedo there. We are incorporating passive lighting within the shop and the warehouse with skylights to incorporate there so that during the day we won't need to use the lighting, supplemental lighting there. We've incorporated passive cooling through adequate number of trees along the site. We have our own internal on our environmental team, our landscape architect who's been doing that, incorporating some of the design, the high quality design that she's helped the architects make sure that it meets our standards. So
that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to add with that, so we've got a lot of the same team from Ryan's side helping us with ours, so we incorporate a lot of those similar design concepts. Also for the Apple Street and U-Stick yards, we're looking forward to the future of fleet as well. And we've asked them to take into account if we were to go to an EV fleet in the future, that we at least have the conduits and everything kind of in place and the power consumption thought process already on the front end, so we're not having to retrofit later. So we'll have that infrastructure kind of built in.
Spot on. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for team?
Madam President, just a quick question. Good, I was gonna ask about the EVs, because I think that's the direction we're all gonna end up going, they'll be incentivized. The other is the geotechnical, environmental all done? So you mentioned about the fact that the tanks have to be above ground. It used to, because you understand about the water table. Is it all done?
Or are we still working on that?
Are we,
Still working
we're
it.
still working,
Yeah.
so, okay. Well,
Yeah.
whenever you deal with property like that, especially next to a railroad, it's like, there's probably some surprises under the ground that we didn't anticipate.
We did, I know with the Apple Yard, we did some analysis of the ground before we purchased it, just to make sure there weren't any big surprises.
Good.
So just some of the sampling, soil samplings and things, that had
Well,
been done.
that geotech stuff will be done this year, this?
Yeah, I
pretty
think
much
so,
this year?
yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, everyone, it is 12:04. We're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone that's here in person and online. Please join us in the stand of Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda. I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. If we do not have any such requests, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Go ahead.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
with thanks to the staff for providing answers to a number of questions about the consent agenda, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. All right, regular agenda. All regular agenda items are commission action items unless noted. And the first order of business is the fiscal year 2023 quarter one impact fee program balance. Welcome, Ms. Christine Tandler.
Have to excuse me, I have a bit of a cough. I'm not organized here. Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Manager for the Highway District. I'm here to present an information briefing on the first quarter impact fee program balance for the district. This button. We began the year at about $9.7 million. We're ending the first quarter about $9.6 million. So we did have expenses that were greater than collections. We had some significant quarter preservation purchases that were done. Main impact fee projects, we're working on all three intersections of Lake Hazel being a priority corridor, and then the Linder and Floating Feather Roundabout as well. In the extraordinary impact fees, we received, I think, about $45,000 in fees. 24,000, excuse me, but the 2.8 million is just how it rounded. And then we did see interest of $18,000. So we are ending our first quarter with a positive balance from the West Foothills account of 2.9 million. And in accordance with 246, I think this should say 246A, excuse me, I'll change that. And authorized by 2331. Geez Louise, this needs to say 9.6. Whew, sorry about that. It's right on my memo. Impact fee program balance of $9.6 million. Sorry about that, I'll correct that. That's
All right, commissioners, any questions for Christine?
Nope, saving them all up for the budget hearings.
No, and I appreciate the itemization, because it does tell when people are asking, you know, where's this going to be spent? And every quarter we get the details, exactly how much impact fee eligible expenditures are and where it's.
Right, yeah, and those are calculated based on percentage, based on phase, based on which types of expenses those all are,
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
Whatever, page
Finally,
4 is really one of the most important from my perspective as to where it's going.
Madam
I've got it
President,
automated, which saves me a lot of time.
Commissioner McKinney?
Christine, just one question. Do you know, and maybe this isn't a question for you, do we have any known, large things coming up that are likely to have a significant effect on that impact fee, balance? Or is that something kind of outside of your sphere and would be better directed to someone else on staff?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we do have several projects that will kind of eat up some of those big ones that I can think of. I know projects in limbo right now is the Orchard Street extension. That project is almost 100% impact fee eligible. The Linder Road between Chinden and Slow, is impact fee eligible. There's some significant bridges that are also eligible there.
Okay.
So those are the big ones, the big players that we're looking at. Again,
Those are coming up this year,
oh, no, those
but
are,
they're further in the future.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a projection right now. We can get it as we go through the budget process, as we go through and do the integrated 5-year work plan. We can do a projection on what we're anticipating for impact fee revenue and then what we're looking at for impact fee eligible projects.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions for Christine on this item? Okay, thank you, Christine. So then, second order of business is the fiscal year 23 first budget adjustment. And we have Christine again.
Again, for the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Manager for the Highway District, here to present first budget adjustments for the fiscal year 2023. This is a decision briefing. I guess we'll hope that there's not any errors on this PowerPoint. All right, we began the year with a budget, a fully approved budget of $181.6 million. This was after some adjustments at the public hearing, if you'll recall, related to the DBIP program. Encumbrances of about $5.5 million were recorded in the FY22 financials, and so we need to move them into the FY23 budget. We do have some one-time adjustments for interest revenue as interest rates increase and we increase our the amount that we're participating in the state pool. Sherwin's doing a great job to get us some additional revenue there. We had originally budgeted $200,000 and he's requested that to be increased to $1.8 million. The state pool's doing very well. And then the next is straight vacation fees and property disposal. This is a reflection of us having sold the building on State Street, commonly known as the Red Roof Inn, on State and Collister, on the west of Collister. Some of the cost share projected revenue, these are all project related, so there's a significant number of these that do have corresponding expenses on the other side. We have the Linder overpass, which is City of Meridian revenue coming in for that. The design of that's about $850,000. The ITD 5-mile overpass is $250,000. And frequently, as we've stated with projects, we will do sewer projects at the same time. So we have the Star Sewer on the Brandon Road Bridge, which is about $830,000. So that's something where they'll be doing that at the same time. And then as that item is billed and paid, then we'll request reimbursement from the City of Star. And then we also have Locust Grove, Victory to Overland, the Meridian Sewer Project, which is just over $800,000. So we do have some significant amounts there on that side. They are typically offset by a portion, if not all, of corresponding expenses on the other side. On the federal aid projected revenue, this is typically related to design and construction engineering related to federal aid projects. For federal aid projects, we do pay the invoices in 100% and then request 92.66% back from ITD for those portions. And then on the side of construction, we typically only ever pay our 7.34%. The commuter ride revenue budget had a net change of just under $21,000 for a total proposed revenue of $192.7 million. On the expenditure budget, we're looking at a total of $187.5 million after adjustments and encumbrances, and I'll go through those in more detail in the next slides. So on the operating budget, after encumbrances, we're looking at just under $100 million on that. We do have a couple salary, I call them A-budget adjustments. One for workman's compensation. That's one where we have to budget that at an anticipated rate. And then as the bill comes in and they apply any discounts and that related to historical, I guess, good practice or not a lot of claims, we see that reduction coming. So typically we'll see that in the first adjustment. And then the 401k match. I typically like to wait and see that in, see who's all signed up for that, do that after the first few pay periods in the fiscal year so that I can capture all of those appropriately. We've also got $150,000 for pavement assessment. This is what we do every 3 years when they go out and look at all of the pavement assessments in the valley and then give us a report on how we're doing on those. I will point out that we haven't proposed in the second adjustments in first adjustments for 2 mini sweepers to be purchased. They do have a short lead time. The anticipation is that we will receive those once the first budget adjustments are approved. It'll come before the commission and we should receive those within this fiscal year. The lead time is not overly significant, so that is something that we can get this year. And then as approved previously on the commission consent agenda was the tree trimming contract. And then, so we're looking at a total proposed operational expenditure of just over $101 million. On the capital budget, after encumbrances, we're looking at just about $84.8 million. Some of the big players here, because actually it's a net reduction to 82.8 or 9 million, is ACHD's portion that will pay to CCDC for this 5th and 6th Street two-way conversion. We've also got some State and Pierce Park intersection and roadway changes. And then the concept design for Fairview Avenue Bridge. There's technically 2 bridges there, even though we all just drive over one. And then with the DBIP having been changed at the end of, or at the public hearing last year, and then the bid came in, so we're adjusting that up by just over $5 million. And residential capital maintenance, we're pushing into FY24. So those two are pretty close to canceling each other out. And then we've just got some other miscellaneous capital adjustments of $50,000. So we're looking at a proposed capital expenditure budget of $82.9 million. So in summary, you can see that we have a total proposed revenue budget of $192.7 million and a total proposed expenditure budget of $187.5. This does leave a variance of $5.2 million. The recommendation from staff is to approve the first budget adjustments as outlined and apportion the $5.2 million variance to the following. Linda Road over Linda Franklin right-of-way in FY24. This is in relation to the overpass, and to fund the signalization initiative, which there's more details coming on that. We'll see some additional items related to the specific line items and the costs for that project that was proposed. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Christine. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
I have a question regarding the signalization initiative. We haven't talked about that much. I don't have lots of details on that. I'd be hesitant to just, automatically make apportioning recommendations regarding that before having a chance to go over that in detail.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I too don't have a lot of details on that, which is kind of one of the reasons that I just put kind of a blanket statement up there, but it's at the will of the commission.
Thanks, Christine. Director, do you mind sharing a little bit more?
Madam President, Commissioners, thank you. Our focus on this is that we will have the detailed outlines and strategy for you no later than 1 March as we work through this. As you can imagine, this is a big project. It's a great project and such. So what our intention is to take and start the process of funding this now by reserving those dollars. You can at any time change those if you'd like going forward. But that was our recommendation for this variance, because we do know that, again, we have those 2 very major projects right in front of you, the Linder overpass, right away, which I think we discussed with all of you just recently, and of course, this initiative to continue to improve safe operations for all users across Ada County and such. I do apologize, we don't have the specific details on this yet, but they are coming. But we'd like to reserve this to start that process so that once we come in front of you on 1 March, we can go.
I wonder, Madam President, if it wouldn't be wise to, the right-of-way acquisition aspect, we've discussed that and we know that's coming. I wonder if it might be prudent at this point to simply reserve for that and for, other purposes to be decided later. I think that would make more sense at this point to just say, we've got this surplus revenue item, and let's deal with that as it comes, but not necessarily earmark it at this exact moment.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yes, having been present for all the past discussions we've had on the leading pedestrian light software technology, and Commissioner McKinney has not, obviously, perhaps we can go back into the archives and find some of that discussion and make it available to him, because I know we've discussed this quite a bit from the time that we had that first tell us from the citizen in my district until today.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, of course, and we can do that for all of the commissioners going forward, and we can have that for you before next week.
Yeah, because, I mean, the benefits to this are going to be incredible as far as the safety aspect of pedestrians. Unfortunately, it comes at a pretty hefty cost, but that's just the way it is. We did some experimenting, which we didn't like, and I know we've tweaked it a couple of times since we started this, so maybe that can be part of what's sent to the commission as well. Thanks.
We'll take care of it.
Commissioner Hanson?
Madam President, actually I had some questions about that too, so the more detail on the signalization initiative. The issue I have is the approval of a $5 million increase in the DBIP contract, because we haven't had that evaluation. We're gonna have our first update in a year in the work session after this, so I can't abide by having us put in an additional $5 million into this contract until we've had a full evaluation. So if we're gonna defer this on the signalization initiative and look at that, I think we need to look at this. We rejected the contract last year, but we didn't have an evaluation, which I asked for. The choice was made not to have a full evaluation and a presentation on the design. And so now we're further down and it'll cost us some money to change it. But I think we have to do that, and that's what hopefully our work session will initiate. So I can't approve a $5 million increase in that contract.
Steve?
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Steve Price, General Counsel. If you are going to defer, it seems to be some interest in doing that, you can just simply defer the allocation of that $5.2 million to a future decision date by the commission. But you can approve the other adjustments today.
So Steve, as a follow-up to that, so are you lumping the Linder, the pedestrian interval and DBIP as like all of those, none of those things have to be voted, I mean, sorry, excuse me, I had a better phrasing of my response to
I'm
you.
with you.
Can you just say that again?
Sure. And and I guess I don't know exactly, if you want to go ahead with the Linder right-of-way, then you can include that in your motion as an adjustment that can be made at this time.
Okay.
But for any additional revenues, those would be deferred to a different decision,
Okay.
a future decision date by the commission.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Madam, I'm sorry.
Christine, go ahead.
Excuse me, Madam President, if I could, just a couple items. The DBIP contract that was rebid is on the agenda for next week. It was at the public hearing when we had delayed and done all those significant changes that we had reduced the DBIP budget by about $5 million because we weren't sure what was going on there. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then with approving a portion of it, I would just ask that we have some clarification on that, with the recommended statement being that we would apportion to the Linder and to the signalization. I don't have a number on that, so that still leaves a little bit of a gray area in that respect. So if we're gonna delay, if it's just a week, then we could probably just wait a week. Otherwise, we'll need a little more information. And also that the reservation for Linder will not be completed until year end. So typically we make those adjustments once a year on our financials into a reservation account. So this is just anticipating that adjustment to be made. Sherwin and his team make those adjustments at the end once we do the final analysis of the total revenues received.
Thank you, Christine. Commissioner McKinney.
Yeah, Madam President, let me just ask, going back then, and I apologize for this, but the Commissioner Hanson brought up the DBIP amount. There was also a residential maintenance amount, and I just want to be sure I understand what that is reflecting. Why are we reducing the residential maintenance by something like 6 million? If somebody could just explain that to make sure I have a clear understanding of what that number is representing.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, Diane Bevins, Manager of Capital Projects. The residential capital maintenance project that we had planned to construct this year is the $6 million number that you're asking about. We're removing that from the 23 budget. We are not able to construct that this year, mostly because of coordination with the City of Meridian regarding a sewer project that they're not ready to build at this time. And so we are delaying that until FY24.
So this is a delay of maintenance of residential streets because of a Meridian sewer project.
That is the majority of the reason that we are delaying, so they have time to design and get the sewer ready to be built with the project. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Then, Madam President, you know, with that being said, it strikes me that the thing to do at this point would be to, you know, approve the budget adjustment, but defer the decision on the, the application of that $5.2 million amount, so that we can, you know, hear full information and make decisions specifically with regard to that. But otherwise to approve the budget adjustment. That would be my preference.
Thanks, Commissioner McKinney. My preference is to defer a week. That's just my preference. I feel like that would just be a little bit cleaner, and we could just approve everything, hopefully with the feedback from today's work session.
Does that cause
and then we could
problems?
provide additional clarification around the leading pedestrian interval initiative. And so all three of those various pieces would be, what I think would suffice. So that's, I'm thinking we just defer it a week, but rather than approve a portion of it today.
Let me ask staff, Christine, does that cause problems if we defer this decision by 1 week?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, no, it will not.
Okay, all right. That would make sense to me as well.
Okay.
one last question, President.
Goldthorpe.
My question, and I might be asking one that you can't answer, first time in over 8 years. If we defer the decision today for a week on the pedestrian interval, will that put us behind or anything as far as implementation? No. Okay, good.
Great question.
No. I wanted to make sure I asked so that I maintain the only 100% that I live for.
Yeah, well, and I want to say, like, I asked her a lot of questions at the last, a series of budget meetings my first year, and I stumped her once or twice, maybe.
I don't keep track of
I know you probably don't keep track, but I was gonna say you aren't the only one, Commissioner Goldthorpe. Okay.
So, Madam President, I agree, especially since the capital maintenance projects in Meridian and the Lender right-of-way projects in Meridian, and if we can get clarity on those two before we, decide on this, I think that's real important. So looks like three things we just need some real clarity on.
Okay.
Before we can move on in a week. It's
So
not
then-
gonna hurt us.
So then do we need a motion to defer this?
That was my question. Yeah, Stacy's saying yes.
Then, Madam President, I would move that we defer the approval of the fiscal year 2023 first budget adjustment to the commission meeting for February, 15th?
I'll second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Christine. All right, the third order of business is the Nez Perce Street Corridor Study. It's an adoption hearing. Welcome, Mr. Edson Batista, and I'm gonna go ahead and open the public hearing.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Edson Bautista, ACC Senior Transportation Planner. In today's meeting, staff would like to present the final recommendation for the Nez Perce Street Corridor Study. On this slide, staff, we wanted to highlight, showcase the corridor as part of the study. This is a connection from Orchard Street to Columbus Street, taking advantage of the local network, such as Malad Street, Pond Street, Country Club Drive, as well as collectors with Roosevelt Street, Nez Perce Street, and finally connecting to Columbus Street. Some of the key destinations that we have along this corridor are the Hillcrest Elementary School, the Whitney Community Center and Elementary School, as well as bikeways along the network, such as the Columbus Street Bikeway, the Shoshone Street Bikeway, and the Latest Street Bikeway, just to provide examples of those. As part of this project, our goals are to identify pedestrian or recommend pedestrian and bicycle improvements that provide a low-stress experience for all users. Also recommend intersection and crossing improvements that increase connectivity, accessibility, and safety. Emphasize the presence of the Nez Perce Street Bikeway as part of the regional bicycle network and also the low-stress bicycle network. And upgrade existing pedestrian infrastructure to comply with the current standards and the American with Disability Act. In this slide, staff would like to highlight the level of outreach conducted for the corridor study. Starting with the advisory committees where we, as part of this project, we presented an initial kickoff with them and also incorporated into the, as part of the email advertisement that we sent for each of the public engagement and also as part of this meeting. In addition, stakeholder meetings with adjacent residents, businesses, schools, and neighborhood association, placing door hangers during public engagement, 3 public comment periods, and 3 virtual public meetings. From this effort, a total of 109 public comments were received during the comment period, 11 public members participating in the virtual public meeting, and 12 attendees during the stakeholder meetings. From the third public outreach, on average, we received a 77% of public agreement of the proposed improvements. In this slide, we want to showcase some of the recommended improvements as part of the corridor, starting with segment 1 from Malad Street to Pond Street, all the way to Country Club, where we are recommending the addition of sidewalk on Malad Street, filling the gap connecting to the existing pedestrian infrastructure. Also in Pond Street, on installing sidewalk on the east side, connecting to the existing sidewalk, and improving Malad Street and Pond Street with marked crossing and ADA ramps. Then jumping to segment 2, we have the Country Club segment where we are recommending pedestrian and bicycle improvements along the north side of the roadway. This includes the installation of sidewalk and bike lanes, which will go right in uphill. Then we have the running towards the east, we have the Roosevelt Country Club intersection where we're reducing the turning radius at that location through concrete islands, and also the installation of marked crossing along the Country Club leg. Then we have the following commission guidance on the pre-adoption. We added the raised crosswalk on the north section of Roosevelt Street that connects that bulb out with our RFB. For Roosevelt, we're proposing the installation of buffer bike lanes and sidewalk on both sides. Entering to segment 4, for this segment, we're proposing the addition of bike lanes on both sides of the street, in addition with the on-street parking on the north side. The installation of bike lanes include the removal of parking on the south side for the segment between Roosevelt to Vista Avenue. As part of the overall recommended improvements, we identified, and the project team identified several traffic calming elements, like such as raised intersection and bulb outs at locations like at Leyte Street, where we have always stop situation. And finally, segment 5, we have from Vista to Columbus Street. We are recommending the addition of bicycle push button at the Vista and Nez Perce Street intersection, and for the rest of the segment, the addition of sidewalk on both sides of the street, including pavement marking. And finally, reaching to Columbus Street, we are recommending the installation of bulb outs on 4 of the legs, at the 4 corner of that intersection. In this slide, we want an inconsistency with the ACHD livable street performance measure. With the proposed improvements, the corridor would achieve an LTS 1 and LTS 2. In addition, in an effort to meet LTS 1 and LTS 2, Nez Perce Street speed limit will be evaluated to be reduced from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour as part of the project implementation. Staff would like to clarify that those areas where we have LTS 2 are mainly because of the current street width constraints that we are, and also based on the matrix that we currently have in place in the livable street performance measures. Finally, Commission, the cost estimate for all the recommended improvement presented in Nez Perce corridor study is of $2.5 million. Staff is confident in the process, and staff recommends the adoption of the Nez Perce Street corridor study as written. With this, conclude my presentation for any questions.
Thank you, Edson. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Anyone? Well, this is great. 10 years in the making. I appreciate the comments from our work session being incorporated in adjustment. I think Commissioner Goldthorpe and I both said, let's try and achieve a LTS 1 as much as possible, as is feasibly possible. And so throughout, LTS 1 is our goal. And I really appreciate the outreach. You know, it really shows when you didn't hear from people, you went out and talked to them, you went to the neighborhood. There's 2 elementary schools, you went and talked to them. There's businesses nearby. You went and talked to them and got some really good input so that we could anticipate as this later on when we're actually doing this, which will be in a couple of years, it's not gonna happen tomorrow. And they get questions, those folks know they've already been approached and have had a say in input. Really like that you recognize that that tighter turning radius on Country Club. We gotta tell us, in fact, I think that a couple days after the work session where they talked about the vision and the turning radius on Country Club, I thought, well, great. I'm sure the response was, hey, we've got a project in the works. And so there's lots of really good components to this. It really does exemplify a really good way of making sure there's a strong sense of ownership over the people in those neighborhoods as to what's gonna happen on a street. And actually, I wanna say that there's a sense of optimism that, hey, maybe we can make a difference, that it's not gonna be done to us. In parts of that neighborhood, there's this sort of a sense of, well, you know, we'll just wait and see what government does to us these days. And it's like, no, actually, you know, we talked to somebody. They came and had a meeting with us. We had an online poll. So I'm getting this sense from people from those neighborhoods that they're very excited. The only thing I think that they're frustrated is it's not gonna happen tomorrow. So you do have to get in line, but that outreach was really, really good. And as a result, we have a design that everybody both understands and can anticipate. And there's pieces on it like the paint and so forth that we can always adjust if we find out that it might need to be slightly adjusted. Thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner McKinney?
Edison, so from this point, this is the concept study. And so we're looking at adopting the concept study, and then what the next steps are, what it goes to design. And at that point, when do we decide whether or not this gets into the 5-year work plan? And maybe that's not a question for you, maybe that's a question for the committee, but walk me through the next steps on this.
100%, Commissioner McKinney. Certainly, and it's included, right now, at this moment, in the adopted integrated power is listed there as part of the projects that we're gonna do in the next 5 years. But with the design taking place, I believe it was pushed to 2024 at this point, and with right-of-way following that. We don't have a construction year, which will be evaluated as part of the integrated power work plan process and the prioritization process at that point. But as of right now, I believe the process is designed moving towards the next fiscal year, and then moving consequentially until we define those last year. So
okay, so the design is in the current 5-year work plan, but the construction is not. Is that what you're saying? Okay, all right. Thank you.
And
Commissioner Hanson.
Commissioner McKinney, the neighborhood would like us to do the design in 2023 and construction in 2024. So I can tell you what the neighborhood would like.
Every neighborhood wants that.
Exactly. So as we consider that, yeah, there's neighborhoods all over. So I think that I hope that we can specify a construction date now that we've got a scope to be within the updated plan. So I'm encouraged by all the great work and the outreach that's been done.
Okay, if there's no other questions, Stacy, is there anyone that wants to testify?
There has been nobody signed up online in the audience, so I think we're good.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Commission, it's up for a vote, whether to approve the adoption.
Madam President, I would move that we adopt the Nez Perce Street Corridor Study.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I just want to also say thank you, Edison. I really appreciate we all appreciate your thoroughness and your work with this community. I want to echo Commissioner Hanson's point about this part of the bench and other parts, you know, and I know a lot of other parts of our county do feel this way, but I think that they're really seeing how much more the extra work and the extra steps that we're taking to include their voices into the process of how we design and develop these projects, and it's making a tremendous difference. And I just want to commend all of you for doing those things, because hopefully at the end we're going to have even better projects as a result of it. So just massive kudos to you in all of that and all of your efforts. Okay, so moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next order of business is public communications. Stacy, is there anyone? Okay. All right, there be no further business before the commission. The meeting is adjourned. Director, did you still need some time before we move into the work session?
Madam President, thank you. Yes, we do. I'd like to have Ryan and Jennifer come back up and share with you our thoughts on next steps regarding how we are approaching the NPDES requirements that we have going forward based on all the growth that has occurred here in the district. So, Jennifer, Ryan?
I was thinking tag team back again, I don't know, something, we could come up with some
The
phrase
dream
here, but-
team.
Dream team, all right,
There
we'll
you
take
go.
that. Just wait for our slides to come up. Today, we're here to talk about our National Pollution Discharge Elimination System
Thank you for
permits.
doing that.
NPDES. This is the work that our environmental team, as well as our maintenance team, cooperate on to help ACHD be in compliance. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a second. Ultimately, our goal is to be in compliance. This is a regulation that came out of the Clean Water Act, and it is our goal to ensure that the waters that are discharged into the waters of the U.S., the Boise River and other creeks and things, are of good quality and don't create negative impacts on the environment. We have 2 NPDES permits. Phase 1 is for Boise and Garden City, and phase 2 is for Meridian. There are 2 areas. We just completed our annual report for phase 1 and are working on our annual report for phase 2. This is the first annual report of this permit. And as we went through it, there were a few areas that we identified that we have opportunities to continue to improve and grow. And these are the ones that we're going to be addressing today. And that has to do with our storm drain inspection and maintenance, as well as street sweeping. And wanted to talk with you about what are those actions that we have in place to make sure we're in full compliance there. And just to kind of touch on graphically what is a permit, we have the largest, as has been noted, we have the largest storm drain system in Idaho that we are responsible for, and water that falls anywhere in our roads eventually ends up somewhere, and usually it ends up going into a water body in some form. We have specific regulations as far as how much of different types of chemicals and nutrients can be in that water. And so there are specific actions that we can take in order to ensure that that water that comes out is clean. We have monitored our 2 staff that are dedicated to monitoring that water and make sure that we can test and see how it's coming out. We have staff dedicated to ensuring we know when there are illicit discharge into our stormwater, as some of the things that they have to see and clean up are unique and special, and I feel for them. But they work closely with our maintenance crews to make sure that that's complete, as well as some consultant services. But ultimately, that's what a permit's for, is giving us the permission to discharge that water and make sure that it is still in compliance. So getting into the 2 activities, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to talk about the specific work her team's doing.
So we brought a consultant on to kind of take a look at what's the scope of what we have to do. Phase 1, we have 24,111 locations that we need to inspect and clean every 12 months. So there's generally in the kind of the Boise area, a lot of impact to the Boise River, and ultimately that is our goal, is just making sure that the water that comes out of the sky that eventually ends up in the Boise River is as clean as possible. And with all the kind of natural things that happen on our roadways, making sure that we get the surfaces cleaned, as well as the stormwater system that carries that stormwater. So of those, the 24,111 locations, those are identified on this graph in the blue. The phase 2 area, over 16,000 locations there. For phase 2, we have to clean every 6 months on the graph. Oh, I'm sorry, every 5 years. I'm sorry. I got a glare, 60 months, 5 years. On the graph, those are in yellow. And then the unphased area, nearly 8,000 locations, those are in black there. That assumes an inspection and cleaning as needed every 5 years as well. So the bar graph is showing what we have out there to clean. And this is where the story is not too rosy. The line in black is our 2-year average for those inspections and cleanings. So based on the people we have and the equipment we have right now for storm drain cleaning, we're not on track to meet our compliance mandate. So bringing the consultant on, he helped us to identify this. He helped us to identify, here's what we've historically been able to do over the past 2 years. There are some things definitely that we're still kind of coming out of COVID with the hiring problem. We do still have people who take time off. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at the best ways to use our forces, our people, and our equipment going forward. What the consultant helped us to do is identify on the map these areas that are in red are the priority, the highest priority areas that we need to hit. The bulk of those being, we need to do the storm drain inspections and the cleaning of the storm drain facilities every 2 years. And then as you move kind of further away from some of those area of impacts with the Boise River, it starts to lessen a little bit. The areas in orange are kind of the tier 2. And then the areas in yellow are where we have the storm drain facilities that aren't necessarily as time urgent to get to. So it's not just, this map isn't just phase 1, phase 2, and unphased. It's looking at the entire system and where would we get the most bang for our buck, putting our people and resources so we can best meet the intent of the permit. Because there is some latitude in the permit. If we can't physically hit every single one, that we're showing that we're making positive strides as we're collecting the data that comes to the outfalls. Is it clean water? So this is what the consultant put together for us on the map. The consultant also recommended that we take our vac trucks for the drainage crew, employ 4 trucks focused solely on the priority 1 areas, and our other 2 trucks in priority 2 and 3. We also want to switch how we're tracking our assets and the inspections and cleaning. So we're developing an in-house app that's going to be very easy for the guys to use when they're track that and the status, and it's a very easy kind of red and green dots on a map, and it uses our GIS. So when they're going out to the field, they can have a pretty clear line of where they need to go to clean. And then we'll see it immediately switch from like a red to a green once that's done, and that helps with the reporting and tracking as well. The final thing that our consultant recommended is that we do more of a 50-50 split cleaning and inspecting. So right now we have our 6 trucks, and you have 2 people, 2 operators per truck, and they have to go out as pairs because of the safety operations. The equipment is dangerous equipment. You have to have 2-person accountability. So what we have been doing is we just send the truck out, they inspect, and then clean as needed, then move on, inspect, clean as needed. What the consultant said is we really should be sending out kind of a recon team of sorts. So getting inspectors out, taking a look, getting through the areas faster to get the inspections done quicker, and then creating kind of that prioritized work list for where we would then send the trucks later. So we're kind of balancing a little bit on this. The consultant said you should bring on 2 people, basically 1 or 2 people to focus solely on the phase 1 area, make sure we get through phase 1 because we have to get through and get that done every 2 years, and then bring on another inspector for phase 2. Knowing kind of where we are in the landscape of hiring right now, I don't know that we have the luxury to just bring more people on to solve that. So we're trying to solve that internally with what we have right now. We're taking a look at our drainage crew and identifying areas that we can be a little bit more streamlined in our operations. Oftentimes we'll have like 1 person out sick, as I mentioned, so now you already don't have a truck going out, so we'll start using those people a little bit more intentionally to do those inspections. We've looked back historically when we only had 3 drainage trucks. What was our throughput back then, like 10 years ago? what were some of the things we were doing back then to keep our numbers up despite having fewer resources. So rather than asking for more people right now, we're really looking internally and saying, how can we just be more efficient with what we have right now? So we're going to track that and see how well this kind of clean inspect 50-50 split is going to work out with the resources we have. And then as we grow and as we even have more space, because that's one of the limitations, we don't really have more room for trucks right now. Not a great environment to hire more people. So we're doing the best we can with what we have, and then we'll attack it in this kind of prioritized way that the consultant has laid out for us.
I have a question for you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
On that last slide. So looking at the map, you know, there's a portion, if you look on the west side, where the Boise River goes to South Star, South Eagle. Why were like a handful of those little spots deemed as like a number 3? Is that based off of the type of drain that it is? Because I would be concerned that those would need to be cleaned because they would be going into the river.
Yeah, Madam President, Commission, the prioritization looked at proximity to the river, the number of outfalls that go into the river. You have a lot more outfalls that go into the river closer into Boise as you do farther out. It was looking at tree canopy. It was looking at other things that would lead to them being a higher priority and more likely to create discharge that's not desirable. So that's where that came from and how we got to that.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Just a quick question before I forget. Is there any potential for the cross-training initiatives that we're doing to help solve the staffing problem here? I know we're not going to get any from the vegetation crew.
Yeah, and we do. And in some cases, we rely on some of that cross-training that's already in place. Some of the folks who have been in the drainage crew in the past, when we've been in emergency operations, we've pulled some of them in to assist. We've talked about this, bringing where we have those extra resources, when we have personnel who are interested in kind of expanding and not necessarily doing a full plunge into a whole new crew, giving those opportunities to backfill and make sure that we've got as many resources as possible. So yes.
Thanks.
Yep. So moving from our drainage crew to street sweeping, the requirements for street sweeping are that we are out there at least once annually. So in areas of the downtown area, Boise and Garden City, we're supposed to be hitting those 2 times a month, arterials and collectors every 6 weeks, residential roadways 4 times a year, and the paved alleys and public parking lots that we own, like ride and shares, those are once a year. So the status of our phase 1 area for sweeping, we're 62 to 66% complete. Phase 2 is going to be the next report. We'll kind of see where we are on that once we start getting the data together for our phase 2 report. But we have already kind of started looking at our street sweeping. What can we do better with our street sweeping? We've had a shift of crew chiefs and superintendents recently, so it's really given us an opportunity with fresh eyes, taking a look at our operations. What can we be doing better? Our crew chief for the broom crew has taken a look at how we're putting our sweepers out there. So we have mechanical sweepers and vacuum sweepers. Right now, the bulk of our crew works Monday through Thursday, and then we also have 2 sweepers that cover a kind of a Tuesday through Friday route. So we have sweepers on Friday, just not the full contingent. And then we have a night crew that comes in. So they'll be in early Tuesday morning, and they run until about 10 o'clock on Friday. So kind of a pretty good coverage of sweeping through the week. But what our new crew chief has looked at for the 37 brooms that we have, how are we best using the equipment that we have and kind of forecasting out those needs. So he's looking at shifting more of the personnel to be a Tuesday through Friday, so we have a little bit better coverage through the entire week. And then focusing again on those priority 1 or the phase 1 zones. A lot of that work is done at night. So no change to our night crew. They're working very diligently to get through the arterials and collectors, and then some of those areas downtown where you're not going to have the impact with a lot of people complaining about noise at night. So getting the busy streets done because they run slowly and we don't want to impact traffic. So he's been doing a lot to shift schedules, and we're going to see if that helps a little bit with our response on the street sweeping. It's definitely going to have an impact when we get into chip seal season. So we're slowly kind of integrating into that, give people a chance to readjust their work week. And then the next step with the consultant is he's going to start looking at the street sweeping as well and making recommendations. After we've kind of got this new schedule implemented, we'll get his independent eyes on it and let us know how we could be doing better in that as well. And I think that's it. So again, our key goal is to comply with the NPDES permit and really ultimately improve the water quality of what gets into our Boise River. So any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for staff?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Jennifer, just a couple quick questions. So based on the one slide that you showed talking about the equipment that we have 6 vac trucks right now?
6 vac trucks.
Okay. And is that the same as sweeper trucks, or is that?
The vac trucks are they're very large.
They're the ones with the hose that go down into the
high pressure
drains.
hose
Okay.
and sucking stuff out.
And the sweepers then, you said
We have
we have how many?
37 of 37
37?
sweepers, including the one mini sweeper.
Okay, and so did you say some of those are vac sweepers and some are just mechanical sweepers?
Yes.
Okay,
So mechanical sweeper is doing more of the big bulk, pushing things around. The vacuum sweepers are really important to kind of pull stuff up and off the ground. Yeah.
And so clarify for me the difference between the phase 1 and the phase 2 permit matters is simply those areas that are considered more significant as discharge locations. Is that all it is?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe
And
that's how they.
Because the earlier question, I believe, I noticed that on that map, there were a number of areas along the Boise River,
Yeah.
out toward Eagle and so on, that were nevertheless not phase 1
Right.
areas, and that's simply because of the number of discharge points, the number of collection locations and so on. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Then talk to me about, and why are there some areas of the county on that map that don't have any color at all? Is
Because
that-
there aren't any outfalls.
None at all, okay.
And they're not
all
part
right.
of permitted area.
Okay, so then talk to me about the compliance issue that exists right now. Is that with reference to that bar graph that you were showing? And simply that wavy line that showed what we're actually doing, and then the bars that were beyond that showing that we're not meeting the inspection and cleaning
Yeah.
schedule that we need to
that's-
meet?
That's correct. That's a visual interpretation of what we have and what needs to be done and what we've historically been able to do. So this being the first year of the permit 1 new permit, we kind of looked at it and said, okay, what have we done this year? And we would assume in order to meet our permit, we have to have 100% done in 2 years. But we haven't hit the 50% mark, so we know we're behind.
Okay.
And then this kind of gave us that visual representation of like, yeah, we've got a lot to do.
So then what happens with regard to the permit? We have to submit our permit information to the EPA, I assume, to get the permit each year or to get it renewed. What happens in this sort of situation?
Yes, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney. So we submit an annual report that says where we are in the process. Because we are actively working to identify improvements, there's an opportunity within the permit language that allows for an adaptive management process to look at it regularly, to update. We've developed a new plan for how we're going to address this. We're going to do it for a year, adapt, decide if there's changes that need to be made. There's always risk. Ultimately we should be compliant now. However, we are actively working, and if we can demonstrate that we can meet the regulations and have the water be clean enough that's being discharged without meeting that the exact schedule it has, we can propose an alternate schedule that gives us more time to clean because we're still meeting our threshold of water cleanliness that reaches the river.
So would that sort of showing include water testing to
Yes.
show exactly what is going into the rivers and so on?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, these are just two of the points that came out of about a 60 point report that asks, are you compliant with this, and education's part of it. Some of our cleaning practices, some of the practices done on the land use side. We're partners with the land use agencies in this compliance. These are just two areas within our control that we identified that we have some opportunity to improve.
Okay, and so what happens if, for example, and I'm not anticipating that this will happen, but just sort of as a worst case scenario, we get to that future point and we're still not in compliance? What happens then?
President Pickering, Commissioner McKinney, I think that I would be quickly talking to our legal counsel on that one, but ultimately that would impact our ability to have a permit and to be able to continue to discharge. We would be directed to come into compliance in a short order and to dedicate our resources, similar to an ADA issue or
Meaning likely, orders from the EPA saying you must do X, Y, and Z, and so we'd have to put a whole lot more money into this sort of thing. Is that a fair
That is correct.
likelihood?
If I may, Madam President, Commissioners, Commissioner McKinney, the areas of the country I've seen EPA orders on violations of the MPDS is just what you described. And they will force you to get additional sweepers or additional staff. They come in when they do an audit and they see whether you have allocated as a governmental entity sufficient resources to address the permit requirements. But one other thing that they do is they will tag you with a significant penalty on top of the order to spend money. Now, the one thing that's been nice is in the past we've had a good working relationship with the EPA and more recently with the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. And that's why we go through and we hire consultants and we do these internal assessments to make sure that we're complying with that program. To the extent that we have violations, they usually on the front end will give us an opportunity to fix those. But if we don't, then the threshold of pain goes up with additional violations. And so we have a great staff that are in control of that program. I work closely with them as well as a lot of the leadership. And we take that issue very, very seriously. And we're trying to look ways. It's an unbelievable task. I think what Ryan said earlier is we're the largest stormwater system in the state of Idaho. And as the requirements become more restrictive, then we're going to have to be allocating more resources. But for right now, I think we're meeting the permit requirements, and any areas of sensitivity, we're most certainly addressing them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
Madam President and Jennifer and Ryan, this is great. I think people don't appreciate how critical this role is, and that we are the Ada County Drainage District as well as running transportation. The questions I have is sort of, I'm looking at that map thinking, in some areas, the actual substances might be more dangerous than just sort of the volume or the potential. So what are those substances that we're particularly looking for, and do we target those to make sure that we go back a little more frequently because we detected these dangerous chemicals going in? That's the key, is because if that gets into the system, then it poses a risk to human health, or the system, whoever downstream is then now responsible for cleaning it up.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, you are requesting the expertise of my team who is not here. So you get me. Ultimately, the decisions and how we prioritize that was because of the materials and potential for greater impact in those locations. So that's how we came up with those tier 1, 2, 3 areas. We are looking at, you know, the pesticides, the herbicides, the things in the air, you know, the leaves and the organic materials, and all of those things have an impact, depending on how well we're able to maintain and clean those out. The silicas, there's, you know, even as we move forward, we're going to also be talking about our winter maintenance and some of the chlorides and the things that we do put on the road and how those get into the water and the impact of that long term. And so we can be ahead of that, where some places, because in some cases, once you fail, you fail. It's very difficult to ever recover from that. And so those are things that my team's watching closely, and we're excited for the partnership we have within the district, between our divisions to work closely and to work towards compliance.
That's great. And I know because our unique situation, not being an enforcement agency, we have to rely on the cities to do the enforcement. That partnership is really, really critical. It's sort of like we're kind of running a liquid landfill. We have to monitor everything that's going into this system. And if there's something that we detect is not appropriate, we can't go and, you know, warn them or whatever. We have to rely on the cities to do that, and that's working well.
President Pickering, Commissioner Hansen, absolutely, it's working well.
Good.
We have a great partnership. We have roles with regards to some of the construction activities and the discharges that happen there. When we identify an illicit discharge, we contact our partners at the cities. They go out. There is a great team that's been working for an extended period of time together to comply.
Great. It'd be great, Madam President, if we could get some data just on that. These are the illicit discharges because ultimately, if we're really effective and they're really effective, that number should be dropping, so that there's less and less of those. So it's sort of all part of the chain. My next question has to do with green stormwater systems, and how does that, because those aren't a discharge, that's actually like, you know, we put those in Acacia Street, we put those in alleys, we see these on some private properties and parking lots and so forth. So do we work with our engineers to say, let's prioritize, figure out how to get these systems in place, or is there just as much risk? Do we still have to inspect those? How does green stormwater fit into all this?
President Pickering, Commissioner Hansen, it is a great tool we have to reduce the amount that eventually get to an outfall. And that's always our effort. Some of the challenge you have is you have old systems in built out areas where it's a little bit more challenging, where there's high groundwater, where certain tools aren't effective. If you think of, and the areas that were tier 1 priorities, it's the downtown cores, it's the north end, the areas where it's built out, you have a lot of tree canopy, you have a lot of things, and the storm drain system is very, very direct into the river. So we are using these techniques in all of our projects. We have best management practices in our policy manual and are continually looking at revisions to that to make sure that we are implementing those things. But ultimately there's some overflow and outfalls that do potentially get into those waterways. And we try to reduce those as much as possible with the green stormwater practices.
Great. Yeah, I think that'd be critical, especially with this residential capital maintenance stuff. You know, I know we're going to have that issue on the Bacon, Brookview, that area of the far east end. It's basically because of the problems with an old drainage system that's got to be replaced. It'd be really nice if a green stormwater system could be put in place, so it would address your issues as well as you know, redesigning the streets. That'd be really good. Thank you. It's complicated, but I appreciate this is being done.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yep, just a kind of a side question here. Since we're have the NPDES permit, a few years ago when we were going through Snowmageddon and we were dropping so many times the material on the roads then that we are now, and I was at the Air Quality Board at the time and was part of a discussion that that the DEQ started, that we were causing a deterioration or degradation in air quality because of our sweepers. Are they still giving us any grief about that, considering we no longer even have to emission test?
President Pickering, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I wouldn't say necessarily that they're giving us grief. That's actually why we have a sweeping program, is to remove the sand, the other types of materials that we use to keep the system safe in other ways. And so that program is intended to reduce the amount of pollutants that get lifted up into the air, and materials that get lifted up. So actually our programs—
You were telling me was that it made it worse. And
well,
that wasn't received by me very well, as you can imagine. But, so that's why I was concerned, to see if they were becoming more concerned about that, and while at the same time holding over us the requirement to take care of the clean water.
yeah, President Pickering, Commissioner Goldthorpe, actually in our permit, it requires sweeping and it requires that schedule. So they want us to be doing it.
One thing I'll add specifically on that is that the equipment that we use, the more we water the road before we pick it up, that keeps the dust down. So if they have those claims, we've certainly made adjustments to our standard operating procedures. New equipment operates more efficiently and less of an impact on the environment. So we've made definitely deliberate changes to respond to those claims.
Has EPA given the DEQ the responsibility for the permit now? Okay.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Well, I just want to say that we can't overstate how important this program is to the health and safety and economic well-being of our communities. So I really appreciate you looking at innovative ways to potentially not need to acquire additional staff, but if you do need additional support from the commission to make this work, please don't hesitate to reach back out to us, because this is a pretty essential function of what we do, and the public expects us to hit it out of the park every time. So you guys are doing an amazing job, and thank you for providing this great report. And the map I thought was extremely helpful to visualize. Okay. All right. With that, thank you. And let's just recess for 5 minutes, then we'll come back and finish the rest of our work session. reviewing the downtown State Street and 9th Street reconfiguration project update. Welcome, Ms. Diane Bevins.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, for the record, Diane Bevins, Manager of Capital Projects and also Acting Deputy Director of Planning and Projects today, while Justin is on vacation. So we'll start with a vicinity map, just to get you oriented to the road segments that we're talking about on State Street and a couple blocks there on 9th. And we'll go back a little bit with the project history. There was a downtown Boise implementation plan adopted back in 2013. It seems kind of crazy that it's been almost 10 years. It was a joint effort with ACHD, City of Boise, CCDC, the Downtown Boise Association, and utility companies. We recognized a need for pavement maintenance in the downtown area, but there was also a lot of development, a lot of utilities that needed to be replaced, as well as a lot of streetscaping and work by CCDC. So we all came together and came up with this plan to get them done together and with less disruption to the public. This particular segment started design in 2019 and has gone through 2021. The City of Boise and CCDC were on the project team, and we did full public involvement. Right-of-way acquisition was completed last year, and if you remember, we bid the project last year, and the original bid was rejected last August. I will point out, excluding small sections of 5th and 6th that took their own path, State Street and this 9th Street segment are the last segments in the downtown Boise implementation plan to be reconstructed. So a little context on this street segment. It is an entryway into downtown from Northwest Boise. We have many direct commercial accesses to parking lots and businesses. It is, once you get in a little bit, it is part of downtown grid network. Again, we kind of mentioned it's a transition into downtown. And we do have a constrained right-of-way as shown by a couple of these pictures on this slide, where the buildings are all the way built up to the sidewalks. And just some highlights of the street condition. This primary purpose and need of this project is the pavement condition. We do have many, if not most of the ped ramps in this area are non-compliant, as well as the driveways are non-compliant and a lot of damaged sidewalks. There's limited or inconsistent streetscape improvements along this section too, and there's a couple of photographs here to show those conditions. The project goals of DBIP 2020 and all of the downtown projects we did, this is straight from our public involvement that we had last year for this project. Increase safety, replace the aging roadway, again, a lot of the ADA upgrades, and partnering with CCDC to do the streetscape. We are adding enhanced pedestrian crossings at 3 intersections. We're doing bioretention, that green stormwater that we were just talking about, critical in the downtown area. And it also does support VRT and their bus route, which goes down State Street. So just to highlight some of our public involvement, we had a website and a survey. It was about a year ago at this time in January and February. We did have 500 views, 30 comments, and the project team, which included again the City of Boise and CCDC, reviewed all the comments prior to finalizing the design. So some of the elements and additional information, we had renderings, which one of them is shown here on the slide. We had a survey, we did business outreach, including presenting to the Boise Chamber, stakeholder meetings, including presenting to the North End Neighborhood Association, and our advisory committees where we send out the memo that I send out every month. No formal response was received, and we presented to the BAC last February. Just to highlight some of the innovative solutions on this project, we are using overhead rectangular rapid flashing beacons with pedestrian refuge and raised islands and raised medians. And again, I'll mention the green stormwater where we have bioretention, curb extensions, and as well as tree cells. So some of the design coordination as we went through this public involvement is we modified a Z crossing at 14th to match the crossing we have at 12th, which is straight across with Refuge Island at the request of City of Boise. The pedestrian refuge islands at 12th and 14 do restrict left-hand turn lanes, providing more safety in that area for pedestrians. We did add an enhanced pedestrian crossing at 3rd Street based on the public input that we got, including the bicycle push buttons. We allowed for some additional space for CCDC to do some streetscapes in the medians. And we have many speed mitigation elements, including bulb outs, landscaping, medians, and enhanced crossings. So another highlight of this is State Street will all be reconstructed using concrete pavement. And that recommendation was made by our district engineer and approved by the commission on November 18th, 2020. Some of the reasons for that recommendation were the section that we have to dig out for concrete is less than asphalt, and it removes major impacts to utility companies. There would be a lot more impacts to utilities, especially CenturyLink, that would have to relocate major fiber along this corridor. And then the lighter road surface would negate some of the heat island effect in urbanized areas. So the current status is the funding for this project, as you heard today, not the entire funding. We are asking for a budget adjustment, but the majority of the funding was budgeted through the 23-24 budget and the integrated 5-year work plan. The original bid rejected by the commission on August 3rd was $15,785,000 there. We did rebid it and opened that bid on February 1st. The low bid was a little bit lower than that at 15.5. 2.8 of that is CCDC's work for conduit and streetscaping. City of Boise has committed to landscape those bioretention areas, so just to know that that $2.8 million doesn't actually include the plant materials. Let's see, I know there was another note. Yes. So the next steps is the commission will consider the bid award next week on our agenda, and I will stand for your questions.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes.
Oh, turn your mic on.
Sorry, thanks. A little bit of history, again, for this particular part of our county. Every couple of years, we hire someone to go out and do a PCI index for us for either residential or arterials, collectors, that sort of thing. And every time we've ever had a index come back that included downtown Boise, and that's just in the years that I've been here, then we've seen that the very worst roads in all of Ada County are in downtown Boise. The reason for that has been described to me many times, that as long as there's as much construction going on down there with the road being torn up and everything else, that we've just been delaying as long as we possibly can some of the improvements or capital maintenance, like the redoing of this road. We've been delaying it for as long as we can. And that's one of the reasons for the perhaps exceptional level of cost to remediate what we see here, is because we haven't been able to do our regular maintenance for quite a while. And so here we have it. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. That's it.
No, you're right on, sir.
Okay, any other question? Commissioner McKinney?
Yes, Madam President. Diane, just a quick question. I recall last August when we rejected the original bid, and of course now it's come in not much different. I thought the one thing that was identified as a reason for the high cost was that it was all in one giant project, and the traffic management issues were just extraordinary because of that. And my understanding was that we were gonna kind of go back to the drawing board and see if it could be broken up into chunks that would make it all together, you know, dramatically reduce the traffic management issues and other related issues, and come up with something that the you know, construction community could bid on, and in the end, we'd have something less. Did we not do that? What happened? Why are we basically kind of where we started?
Yes, so Commissioner McKinney, we had many meetings with our construction department to talk about the best way to rebid this project. And in the end, we thought giving them more time, so it's over 2 years, 2 construction seasons, instead of breaking it into 2 projects, 2 different contractors over 2 years, that would be a better way to bid this project. So we had a lot of meetings discussing that, and with our construction department, you know, deferring to them and their expertise, this was the best case scenario that we could come up with. The average bids did come down, if you look at the other 2 bidders, by 10%. The market has spoken, and this is the price for this project. We bid it twice, it's 15 and change. You know, sometimes we don't get to determine the cost of the projects.
Right.
The market does.
So basically, then the approach that we took was, rather than dividing it into multiple projects, we simply lengthened it out time-wise, giving them more flexibility. But even still, with everything, it still only made a difference of what, like
A few $100,000.
$300,000 or $400,000 is all. Okay. But this project does involve, is it all of State Street, or is it both State Street and 9th Street that are getting a concrete pavement? Is it the entire project that'll have concrete pavement, or just,
Yes, so Commissioner McKinney, the concrete will go on State Street until 4th Street, and then 9th Street is asphalt. Oh, excuse me, 9th Street is also concrete, the 2 blocks.
okay,
Can you restate that, Diane?
So State Street from 16th to 4th is concrete, 4th to 2nd is asphalt, and then 9th from Bannock to State is concrete.
so we'll hope that they'll last 100 years. Cross our fingers. But
50, 75, yes.
concrete will last a lot longer than asphalt in any case, but boy, it costs a lot of money. So, okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that's all my questions.
So, Diane, I've got lots of questions, and I want to preface this by saying, you know, when this project got kicked off in 2019, and then it was approved again in November of 2020, that was before 3 of the existing commissioners were here. So, you know, even when we saw it last year, in my opinion, we didn't really have a discussion about the design. We heard lots of commotion on the back end, I think, from our various partners in the community about their concerns. And so I just have a lot of questions that I have for you today. So I want to preface it with that. And I want to start off with the pavement versus concrete thing. And so Commissioner McKinney was asking about that. And that's what wasn't clear to me, is what parts are concrete, what pieces are pavement, and and I see that you included the engineer's recommendation that it needs to be concrete, but I didn't see any other justifications around lifespan or cost of maintenance, or, you know, was it also considered, okay, pavement, but obviously not chip sealing, but what would the cost and lifespan be of just repaving, and those nuances there? So can you explain those various trade-offs to me?
Yes, Madam President, I do have some numbers. I will state that we haven't done a specific life cycle cost analysis, which is an engineering term, a very involved calculation. But so what the information I have is just for the pavement between the curbs, some basic numbers for concrete versus asphalt and maintenance. So in this bid, based on our estimate, the concrete cost about 2.7 million more than if we would have done it in asphalt.
And
So
Diane,
the number.
that's just, that would be of the portion of the 15.5 million, it would be 2.7.
Right.
Just for concrete,
Right,
okay.
additional cost over what it would
Over
be
what
for
payment would
asphalt.
be. Okay, thank you.
So if you take into account the life of concrete, that could be 40 or 50 years, and we hope to even get more out of that, where asphalt has a life about 20 years. So you would look at a mill and inlay project, or having to remove and replace the asphalt, or a complete rebuild, again, for these segments within that 40, 50 plus years. So with those numbers that we have for those different elements, just our estimation of what we would have to do over the next 40, 50 years, it's about $3 or $4 million. But I will also preface that, and that's in 2023 dollars, not 2043 dollars or 2063 dollars. So the savings would be much greater with the 2.7 million in today's dollars, not having to do, extensive maintenance of the asphalt over the next 40 to 50 years.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that, that's helpful. And then in terms of, because again, I wasn't here when those other early design conversations happened, and I feel like when it was like mostly baked as well, was there ever a consideration, or did you ever explore various design options in terms of 5 lanes versus 3 lanes?
Right. Cody, the project manager, will answer that one.
Commissioners, for the record, Cody Holman, Capital Projects Project Manager for this project. President Pickering, the best answer is really no. This project started as just a maintenance project and has kind of grown since then. The only change in layout was between 14th and 12th to actually widen to 5 lanes instead of 4. And that was so we could get the left turn lane at 13th Street, so we could have its own movement there. Otherwise, we wanted to keep the road the same kind of layout throughout. We definitely didn't look at widening any further, east of the Capitol. The traffic's relatively low there, so, and then trying to squeeze down, traffic picks up significantly at 9th Street to the west, and I don't think a 3-lane road would be adequate.
So Cody, is there a map that you could pull up and describe that? So you're saying that from 14th to 12th, you would widen to 5, but then from 12th to 9th, it would remain the same?
Yes.
Okay, and it would be 4 lanes then?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have these screenshots from our public involvement maps that walk down the whole corridor, if you would like me to walk through those.
That would be great.
Okay, so this is 16th, and the intersection at 15th was done a few years ago with a separate project, so this intersection stands on its own. The purple that you see in all of these slides are the bioretention areas, and the blue or cyan color, that's where we're updating the sidewalk or ped ramps. And as you can see on 16th, on the south side, we do have bulb outs there. This is going to 14th, this is where we have the RRFB on the east side. And let's see, bioretention swells, some bulb outs here as well. And I'll pause if you have questions at each intersection. Okay.
Commissioner Hanson might have a question.
So this does show, as what Cody was mentioning, between 14th and 13th, that center turn lane there to provide that north and south left turn lane.
Commissioner Gold.
I do have a question on the previous intersection. Can you speak to the reduction of a leg of the pedestrian crossing there on the west side of that? I think it's the west side of that intersection.
Yeah. President Pickering, Commissioner Gold, when we put in these usually more than 2 lanes, sometimes we'll do it on a 3-lane, but especially for these 5-lane crossings, when we put in an enhanced crossing, we want people to use that and not cross against the enhanced crossing. Just makes them more visible, especially to drivers. It's where they're expected. So we'd rather them cross 14th Street if they need to cross State Street. And we did evaluate that, and because traffic is so low on 14th Street, we thought that was worth the additional 2 crossings, even if you're, have mobility or visual impairments. We thought that would ultimately safer to direct people towards the RFB instead of crossing without it. Is that your question?
Yes, thank you. Madam President, follow up to that. So this is the intersection that was previously proposed as the crossing that is now has a refuge island. And this is a single stage crossing, pedestrian crossing. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
So, Madam President, thank you. While we're on this, so you're adding the center turn lane, so the crossing distance will be increased, and then so go back to the 14th.
Okay.
And so the expectation is that pedestrians will do something which they don't do today, which is they will have to, if there's a pedestrian walking on the west side of 14th, they will be expected to go east and then cross and then go back west again. Even though this is a pretty dense urban area and it's getting denser by the day, is it unreasonable to expect some people will simply say, why don't I just go the direct route I've always gone and just walk across, even though we've now added another, 12 feet or something to the crossing distance by adding a turn lane?
We didn't add ramp on the west leg though, right? It's always 5 lanes. Okay. Commissioner Hanson, I suppose if an able-bodied person chooses to cross there and they can look both ways, they will, but we have provided the safest option for those that will cross and use the RFB.
So this is one of the things I think the design overall is good. There's a lot of good things, but I think if we're gonna spend $15 million plus in taxpayer dollars, we have to get each of the intersections right, much like we did on Nez Perce, which we just approved. And there we had raised crossings. We have some things because we have an understanding of what people in the neighborhood are actually doing now and how they will operate. And if someone is hit and killed crossing in that leg, we could say, well, it's their fault. They weren't crossing in the right crosswalk, but they're still dead. And so that's one of the reasons why I strongly object to removing an existing crossing and then making that crossing wider. This is very dense urban. It should be operating like the other dense urban crossings, 14th and Jefferson, 14th and Van Eyck, 14th, so on down 14th, and that's the same thing on 12th. So that's why I think it's really critically important that we give people options. Which would you prefer? And it's to accommodate a left turn on 14th by adding this additional turning lane, when I just heard that the volumes don't justify the volumes on people heading north on 14th, as opposed to if they were just in the 4 lanes and making a left turn and the person behind them wait until they turn. So
Commissioner Hanson,
that's an example of why I think we are creating a danger by eliminating an existing crossing and then making that crossing 12 feet wider.
well, Commissioner Hanson, I hope that you understand that was not our intention. That our engineers,
absolutely.
our project team put forward the safest thing we thought possible.
Totally.
Are you saying you prefer a full signalized intersection here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's very critical, and there's no intent. This is to reflect the concern of the people who live and work there, as well as the taxpayers who are going to pay for it. I think there's heightened sensitivity to that. There's going to be 11-story building built on State Street by the Y, south of State Street. It's a huge, very big building. So we can anticipate more and more and more and more people crossing there. And so it has to look more and more and more like the 4-way crossings, the 4 crossings in the rest of the downtown grid, and not like an arterial. And I appreciate Cody's comment. This started out as a maintenance project, and it's sort of morphed into this. rather than it started out as a safety design project, which we probably wouldn't be having this conversation if it started out as a safety design project. So that's why I think it's real important that we get each intersection design right.
Madam
And then,
President,
hold on, let me follow up on that. So, Diane, Cody, do you guys have traffic counts or traffic volume numbers for these blocks within State Street in this project that you could share with us?
We do have them. I don't know if we have them with us.
And maybe I could follow up to that. So my big question was, considering that a 3-lane, narrowing this to 3 lanes and not knowing the trade-off with traffic volume, it's like, can the 3-lane potentially, narrowing it, will that serve that same amount of traffic volume, relatively similarly, but also increase that safety component and potentially reduce the concrete costs, right? That's kind of what I'm trying to piece together in my mind is, because ultimately, similarly to what Commissioner Hansen is saying, there were so many things we didn't know in 2019 or 2020, especially with the development that's happening, the various land uses, and a 5-lane arterial, to me, it just doesn't seem to fit. And so the fact that it wasn't considered back then, and then also just wondering, well, we don't even have the justification for whether or not 5 lanes is what we need. That's what I haven't heard anyway.
Madam President.
Hold on a second.
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, and I'm answering this on behalf of my traffic engineering team. We do have counts in this location. The counts down around 10th Street are about 14,000 vehicles a day. It goes up by about 1,000 vehicles a day each street as you go west.
And then,
The recommendation, originally this was a 4-lane section. The area that we're looking at here is actually exceptionally narrow, and that was a request of the city of Boise to come up with a consistent cross-section and to add the addition of the streetscape improvements for CCDC. The addition of the center turn lane was due to a crash history at 13th Street. With the 4-lane road, you have vehicles that stop in order to turn left. There's a lot more movement at that location. And so the crash history there showed that if we were to add a center turn lane, that would eliminate the problem that was there. And so that's, in a lot of this area, you had extra wide lanes. And so you're not actually adding a lot of asphalt or street width, you're just reallocating it to create that center turn lane. And so those are the reasons why my team made the recommendation for the modifications that you're seeing here. It was not an intention, a widening like you would have like on an arterial roadway. It was actually for a safety purpose to address the crash history that exists.
that's really helpful, Ryan, and I totally agree on the center turn lane piece, because it's, it's very there's so much moving pieces and parts, it's a little chaotic down there. But to your point about reallocating the pavement and just what's currently there, we know that when we have 5 lanes, just the driver behavior changes versus when it's on a 3-lane roadway, and this is a really urban environment. And so you're saying safety features, absolutely. There are some safety features here that do elevate it from its current status. But my thing is, if it was 3 lanes, it would be even safer from what we know.
Well, Madam President, I think the traffic numbers show that that is impossible.
Could elaborate on that, Diane?
Well, I would have to defer. I think 14,000 and then increasing as you go west, that is beyond the capacity of a 3-lane road.
As we understand in terms of like peak hour, right? That's
correct.
That's just a couple hours during the day.
Correct, which is how we design our roads.
Right, so
And
with
how
the
most of the
big
country
asterisk that it's not failing, it might fail during, peak AM and PM, but it will increase the safety of it from a bike and pedestrian standpoint, which is gonna be heavily used by folks down here. I just take issue with the whole failure piece.
Right,
Thank
okay.
you.
Well, I brought this slide back up because there's a before and after here, where you see the addition of the vertical elements with the street trees, the enhanced crossing that's not currently at this intersection, as well as the medians, which are traffic calming features and a lot of that's being put over the entire corridor. So it's not like we're taking this corridor and adding width without the consideration of other elements that change the look and feel of the 4 and 5 lanes on State Street.
And
It was
again,
not done without intention, I guess.
no, and this is not about intention. I'm just saying that if you're adding lanes, even with the vertical elements, even with, center lane and these pedestrian islands, we could increase the safety even more from what you have proposed if it was narrower in terms of not 5 lanes and 3. That's my point. But, Commissioner Gold, did you have something?
Thanks, Madam President. My question was going to be if we also have pedestrian and bike counts, in addition to traffic counts, and how, these changes, particularly where the left turn lane is going in, have impacted level of traffic stress on that stretch.
Commissioner Gold, we do not have pedestrian counts and there are no bike facilities along State Street.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
Yeah, I'd like to offer a word perhaps of caution here in light of kind of where we stand. I think it's worth us recognizing that project has already been designed and gone to bid. The issues that you're bringing up now are issues that if they were to be, to the extent that they were considered or should have been considered, would have been considered several years ago. We're way beyond that point now. If the project is bid and is awarded, any changes to it would require change orders, and those become extremely costly. For us to go back and nitpick the whole concept from the beginning at this point in the process, I don't think is very wise at all. Basically, the cross-section of State Street is not changing except for at 13th Street. Is that correct? We're basically keeping the same cross-section the way it has been for a long, long time, with that one exception. We're just rebuilding it. And we're making pedestrian enhancements and these other enhancements that we're talking about. So for us to go back and try to, first of all, not being experts in highways and traffic and all of that sort of thing, for us to go back and second guess the design decisions that were made years ago and maybe to suggest changes and so on at this point is just, we're like, years too late on this sort of thing. And it, so I think it would be perfectly fine for us to go through and for Diane to show us the project and go through and see all the details. But for us to say, I don't like this, I don't like that, we change that, let's change that. We're not at that point. We're way beyond that. So I don't think, I think we've got to keep that in mind as we're talking here.
Madam Chair, if I could clarify on
Sure,
Commissioner
Hanson.
McKinney.
Yeah.
Commissioner McKinney was here last year when we rejected the bids. And I did ask President May to have a hearing on the detail before we go back and bid. And she made the choice. The choice was made not to have this discussion, this very discussion we have today. So this was rebid as it was. So we didn't reopen it. We didn't look at this. We didn't consider the concerns that I expressed and the people who've talked to me have expressed. And so it could have been done last year, but I think some of the expense of moving forward has to do with, because we just simply didn't do this. The full public involvement, when we say full public involvement, occurred in 2013. The follow-up involvement was this online survey. But to me, the full public involvement, like on 8th Street, is what we saw when we said, here's some ideas, and this room was full. And those property owners and those residents came up with some ideas, and Commissioner Goldthorpe had an idea from that input. I had some, others did, and we changed them up. This has not been afforded, because I think the concerns that there's a lot of good in this, but the resistance to make these changes and to just plow ahead and spend $15 million, I'm gonna continue to resist. I do wanna go back to that slide, the previous slide on 13. There, stop there. So there's a section, which is very troubling today, which is the section between 12th and 13th, and you can see the building to the left there. That's a parking garage, used to be a Sears, and now it's the State Insurance Fund. They ripped out a lot of the landscaping. The block to the east and to the west, I think I'm at the right location. The block between 10th and 11th on the south side of State, and between 11th and 12th on the south side of State, has mature trees and is actually occupying some space that we would then rip out. So the trees that would be added, which you're talking about, would actually be brand new trees. So we would remove mature trees along part of this corridor in order to make it consistent with that one block where it's wide between 13th and 12th.
Commissioner Hanson, we are saving those trees.
All the big trees.
And can,
Yes, sir.
can you repeat which section would be saved there?
Between 11th and 12th,
Between 11th and 12th?
10th and 11th.
10th and 11th and 11th and 12th.
Okay. And is that the entire section that you
But,
were
well,
referring to, or?
The city asked for consistency, and instead of consistency between the blocks on the other side of the State Insurance Fund, we're gonna make it consistent with the width of that in front of the insurance fund. And I don't see the justification for that.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Again, I'm kind of the history guy today. Over the years, we've discussed to the nth degree, not with some of you here, but trust me when I say we have torn this apart like nobody's business when we've discussed the safest routes for bicycles and pedestrians, bicyclists in this case. And we have decided on past occasions, not all of us were involved in that decision, but to make Jefferson, Main Street, Idaho, we have streets that are built and being built and planned to be built with some specific bicycle treatments. This was never one of them. This is the only multi-lane, a little quicker type road to get in and out of town north of Front Street in Myrtle. And I don't think we need to even begin to consider making it a 3-lane road unless we're going to help the folks who are trying to get in and out of town on another road. But this is the ideal place for it, in my opinion. So I will certainly agree also with what Commissioner McKinney said about doing a whole lot of surgery at this particular point in time when from a timing standpoint, no.
Madam President, may I point out a couple of items on this particular slide?
Sure.
So right here is the extent of the project.
Mm-hmm.
This is already built in concrete. This is not being widened. We are not replacing any of the curb and gutter beyond fixing ADA issues at the corner and this driveway. So this width of this roadway is not changing with the project.
Mm-hmm.
Between 14th and 13th, I will point out that with the left turn lane here, we are able then to do red before PED. With no left turn lane, we are not able to do that. So that's a benefit of having the left turn.
Okay, thank you. So, so Commissioner Goldthorpe, I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of, hey, we've talked about this a whole lot, we're, like in your mind, right? Cause you've been here.
We spent a ton of money.
You've spent a ton of money, right? I can understand the fatigue with that. So with that being said, there's 3 of us that haven't, and even if, Commissioner McKinney, you feel like it's fine as it is, that's okay too. But, I think we have so much, and again, I think the staff did the best they could, and you guys have I feel like it does improve the corridor, but my whole point is, if we're spending this amount of money, and we've gone to this amount of effort, why not just tweak it the way that our community has asked for it to be tweaked, and as potentially some of the commissioners are asking for it to be tweaked, so that it can be exceptional.
Well, I've never heard a single person in the community ask for this.
Again, I'm just saying, I feel like we're I mean, as a commission, we've already responded to being more sensitive to the deaths of folks that have died along State Street and the accidents on 11th and State. And, the removal of a crosswalk, all of these pieces, right, we wouldn't consider now. And we're just saying, oh, okay, well, because this is such a mostly baked project, it's fine. And so my point is, I think so much has changed, and if we don't reconsider this and adapt, and I'm not saying overhaul the entire project, but there are some massive questions around why wasn't it 3 lanes, and also my whole thing too is the right across from the Capitol and the Capitol Mall area, it's 2 lanes, and granted that's not funneling people onto 9th, right? To walk or bike or drive along that stretch is extremely pleasant. Those folks that walk to, because I used to work down there, you have a great PED signal, there's underground tunnels, there's all of that, and they have the luxury of having a 2-lane road. So why does it, my old philosophical question too is, why did it stop there? And why wasn't it extended further west? And I feel like that conversation, and I know you might have a historical background to that, Diane, but that conversation wasn't had at the commission when I was here, or when Commissioner Gold was here. And again, that's a massive question and consideration, is why can't that treatment and that experience also be shared where a lot of residential folks live, where the Y is going to be growing extensively. There's so much economic activity going on down there, where these PED bike counts are going to be increasing, kiddos walking. And then also, we've heard from people on the whole 8th Street project about their displeasure of us not considering 9th Street as a couplet or a piece of that project. And in my mind, adjusting this can serve that function as well, potentially. And a lot of those concerns are, 9th Street needs to be fixed. It's so fast, it's not safe. And I think that this can also improve that safety piece of it they're asking for, but on a separate project, if that makes sense. So I don't know where that leads. I understand where Commissioner McKinney is saying, and he thinks this is done, but I also disagree that we have the ability as a commission to switch gears if the majority asks and wants to switch gears, as we have in the past, and as ITD has demonstrated when they have a fully baked design of a massive overpass. They have switched gears entirely and did it very quickly. And we know that our community partners like CCDC and the city of Boise are standing by to support us to meet those timelines, and don't think that this could be impacted by us working through some of these other big kinks. So,
Madam President,
that being said,
can I add one additional reminder? This is not an action item. This is merely a work session. This is for information. There's nothing for us to decide. The bids are in.
Yeah.
And so we're not in a position to do anything here today. When it comes time to accept or reject the bids, if we were to reject the bids at this point, that would only cost us more money, more time, more trouble it would be. But in any case, that's not even on the table here today.
Right. But I'm just stating my opinion so that it's known to the commission and staff. And, I agree things will cost more in the upfront piece of it, right? But if that is going to reduce additional people from dying or crashes, or having a development that is going to stand the test of time and is going to work for us in 10 years from now, not just from a concrete maintenance standpoint, but the actual design of it is going to grow with our community and work with them, that's an investment well spent in my mind.
Madam President, beyond making some of these sections 3 lanes, there is a lot we can do within the bid that we have before you next week. So if you next week choose to accept the bid with some modifications, you can add that on, right? So if there's a majority to signalize 14th instead of having the pet signal, or you want us to relook at between 12th and 13th.
Madam President, may I request like a 3-minute recess?
Could we add, after Diane, could Diane finish really quick?
I'm sorry?
Diane finish her, her points,
just a
please.
3-minute
And then we
recess
have a
before we-
recess after that. Yeah, thanks, Diane.
I have a couple comments before the
Okay.
3-minute recess,
Okay.
if you could.
My point is, if you decide, obviously, it's up to the 5 of you, beyond changing it 3 lanes, that would be a major redesign and a rebid. There are things we can change within the project.
And would that, I think part of also the added to the complexity and the frustration that I have, and it's not directed at you, Diane, it's just that there haven't been that type of detail and understanding of what that type of, like, you just sharing that only kind of gives me a little anxiety, because it's like, how are you gonna share that with us in time to make an informed decision that this is the right bid? So I feel like, although I really appreciate you making that, suggestion and illuminating that flexibility, I feel like we would still need more time, if that makes sense. But do you have a quick question, Commissioner?
So, no, I would completely agree with you. We're finally having the discussion I wish we had last year. We were denied that opportunity to have that discussion. I did ask folks at the city and the CCDC. The city's like, okay, we're afraid if you don't go ahead with this, we won't get anything. And I said, well, but if we make some changes, would you participate in making it better? Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. We would love to participate in making it an even better design. Because in a negotiations, you don't always get what you want. And I want to know, did they ask for this? I'm very concerned that we're putting an RRFB. It costs to upgrade that to the Hawk signal, and then it costs to upgrade that to a full signal. And we're putting it all in concrete, and so the cost of upgrading it, as there's significantly more people coming in, would be very significant. Why don't we build to what we know is going to happen with the growth of development downtown? It makes no sense. I think Commissioner McKinney made that with respect to something on Maple Grove. Let's just build it to what we know based on the growth. And the other is, we've talked about traffic counts, but I haven't seen any PED counts, nor the projected PED counts over the next 5, 10, 15 years with what the development we know is going to happen, let alone what is likely to happen with the transformation of some of those surface lots into other high rises and residences and businesses and so forth. So the absence of pedestrian counts is a huge problem to me. And I think, just like Cody said, it started out as a maintenance project. We got the data we have, and we started from there. I think we need to rethink this and come up with, we'll take this as the base design, but come up with designs that then fit with an urban environment and really invite CCDC to say, okay, how would you design this if this were entirely within CCDC's jurisdiction?
Thanks, Commissioner. So it's approximately 2:14 right now, and we will take a 4-minute recess, and we'll be back at 2:18. Hold your horses.
Now we're not talking about it. When are we going
Thanks, Diane.
Okay, now we're live. Madam President, we are able to delay the bid award another week to give you 2 more weeks from today to come back for that. And we can look at some other things and bring back some options for you with that bid award on March, I believe it's March 1st. Or the 22nd.
That would be 3 weeks away.
Yes. February 22nd.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Diane, in a case like that, what can happen, if a bidder has already submitted a bid? Do we request all the bidders to reconsider these things? Because that doesn't work. How does this work? Okay, we're gonna get our lawyer. That's good.
We have a bid before us.
Right.
And we have to accept or reject it.
Right.
I think maybe in a separate motion, the commission can direct us to look at some items to then change through a change order.
Right.
I
so
will let
those are-
Steve confirm that.
So those are change
Amend
orders,
certain
right?
pieces
Yes, sir.
potentially. No.
And once you have a low bidder who's got the job, change orders, they get really expensive because they know there's nothing competitive on those. They get it, that's why change orders get so expensive.
Commissioner, we do negotiate those. There are parameters around changes in quantities and unit prices, that help protect us with change orders, and those are negotiated. They're not just a given.
Right, well, right, I know they're negotiated, but the having done contract management on a number of construction projects, I just know that, change orders get really expensive.
Concrete, can I ask them?
For that reason.
Again, it will depend on what the changes are.
Diane, Commissioner Hanson has a couple questions for
More
you.
questions about the concrete. So I also have the same heartburn over concreting it from 4th to 15th, or 4th to 14th. So the segment in front of, concrete has to do with volumes and speeds too, but especially volumes and intersections. And I can see where you got lots of volumes going over the intersection, so you concrete the intersection. But we have a segment in front of the State House that's 2 blocks, that's 2 feet wide. People know, in order to drive along that, they know how long it's gonna take. They go slow, and volumes are lower. If they wanna go on a faster route, they can go down to Jefferson, or Bannock, or Maine, or Idaho. So there's lots and lots and lots of choices in a gridded network. So, and yet we're gonna rip out what the state asked us to build a number of years ago and concrete that whole section all the way from 4th. Is there really justification to do that other than just at the intersection? The other point is that we're now moving forward on an 8th Street design, which says, okay, certain volumes are probably gonna be minimal turning north on 8th Street, so that people recognize how to do that. So why even concrete between 8th and 9th?
So, Commissioner Hanson, we have been doing concrete downtown with all of it for several years with our projects based on that slide I had up earlier. Mostly, utilities downtown are extensive. So we have less impact to utilities when we do the concrete section, and it's the overall maintenance. We don't chip seal downtown, so we have limited options on maintaining the asphalt. That is the main reason for using concrete in the downtown area. That it's different decision making based on when we concrete our intersections out, on arterial.
So that's what, I get the analysis, because on the concrete side, we're thinking of it as a downtown gridded network. But on the width and the turning lane side, we're thinking of it as an arterial that has to move a lot of traffic. So we got 2 approaches that I think are in conflict. And so I think that needs to be opened up and say, which side are we on? Are we gonna be treating this like a gridded, like the gridded network, or are we saying the gridded network, a downtown core with the dense populations and the big buildings doesn't start until down at Jefferson and then goes south from there? Or are we actually incorporating this? My assumption is, if we do have to go in, if a utility does have to cut the concrete, it's a much bigger job. You have to actually cut out a big block, right? And it's a much bigger, more disruptive, it takes longer because concrete takes a couple days to cure. So that's a bigger job, maintenance-wise too.
Commissioner Hanson, they can also bore underneath the road. That's an option besides removing the concrete panels. And there's a lot of utility work also going on with this project. There's a new water line, new conduit going in, so there's less disruption to the concrete in the future. That has been thought out through this process and coordinated with all the utility companies.
Thanks, Diane. And Commissioner McKinney, can you restate your question to Diane for Steve?
Yes, I will. And while he's coming up, let me just, kind of in response to what Commissioner Hanson just said, I think the two issues Commissioner Hanson just raised are independent and not related to each other. The width of the street versus the material of the pavement, those are two completely separate considerations. And the concrete pavement just lasts longer, and that's why they want it to last longer, thinner section are the primary reasons. So here's my question, and that is to say, the question I had for Diane is, now that the bids are in, and we can simply accept them or reject them, how would we make any changes? You know, it's kind of like, you know, closing the barn door after the horse is out. What can we do at this point, where we've got a bid that's already in? What changes can be made?
Madam President, Commissioners, Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. Well, that's it just depends on the changes. I hate to tell you that. If there's significant changes, then you're better off just throwing out the bid and restarting it. But if there are minor changes, then you can do that through change orders after the contract.
Right, okay, so in any case, if we make any changes now, they all have to be done through change orders.
Correct.
To the bid, the low bidder who gets the bid, assuming we accept the bid.
To the awarded vendor who got the low bid.
And the other option is to, you know, kind of go back to the drawing board and make some changes and then rebid it, right? And that's very costly. So, okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
And then Commissioner Gold.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So, I have I know we didn't make it through all of the intersections, but I have a question about, can you speak to how the enhanced pedestrian crossings were selected, 14th, 12th, and 3rd?
President Pickering, first, Commissioner Hanson, I need to correct myself. I think I misspoke. We are removing the trees on the south side of State Street on the west half of the block between 12th and 11th. So first I wanted to correct myself there.
Mature
then,
trees.
yeah, Commissioner Gold, that was an extensive discussions throughout, you know, the project initially. We looked at, does 12th and 14th, should we do a full signal? They do not meet warrants for a full pedestrian signal. Then we looked at PHBs, which would be more likely, no scenario, on a 5-lane road. But because they're so close to the signals, we're worried about a PHB backing up traffic back into the signals, which is a very extensive safety concern, both for drivers and pedestrians and cyclists to have, you know, that weird spot where people, they have a green light, but they can't move forward. So we figured that the goal was to make the crossings where there wasn't a signal safer, and to make them the most safe, the least overall impact was to do overhead RFBs. So they're not our standard, just, you know, poles of the lights. They're actually overhead, more so that, you know, you can see them from both lanes. We did the medians there, so you can, they are one stage, not two stage, but you can cross to the median, and there is a button there. So if you don't make it all the way across, you can hit the button again to activate it if you have to. And yes, it's not perfect, but the team decided this was the, you know, the best option for both intersections.
Okay, thank you. Madam President, a follow-up to that. Well, I just have a couple of comments. I appreciate the comment that this is kind of the entryway to downtown and moving from the edge to the core of downtown, and that it started as a maintenance project. I think it's clear that the sidewalks and ramps are deteriorating and really do need updated, and so I can appreciate that that's where this started. This is my district, and I have heard feedback from folks hoping to see maybe some additional pedestrian enhancements. And I know that we have a meeting next week to hear feedback from the Y as a significant portion of this area of State Street. The land use intensity and density is going to increase a lot, and they're concerned about, you know, increased pedestrian risk. So I definitely think that that feedback should be considered. And since that's not happening until the meeting, after the meeting next week, then that's really hard to offer you at this point. That's probably all I have right at this moment.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
can I ask this is one question that should have been asked a while ago. In all of this, we're looking at this, the price tag for this project and haven't gone back to ask about the budget. Last August, part of the reason that we choked on this bid amount was because it was way beyond what had been budgeted. Where do we stand with that right now? How does this amount compare to this low bid amount compared to what's been budgeted and so on? Talk to me about that.
Yes, Commissioner McKinney, it was included in Christine's presentation. There's a $5 million first budget adjustment request for FY23. And then we would have to budget the remainder in 24 when we do the 24-25 budget.
So basically, we don't have it all budgeted at the moment. We're gonna have to come up with the remainder to complete the project.
Commissioner McKinney, yes, as the first budget adjustments stand right now, that $5 million was included with the additional 5.2 that was unallocated. So that 5 million was already included in that calculation for a first budget adjustment.
So if we took that unallocated 5.2 million and added to this project, we would still not quite be there. We would still need additional funds.
I'm not sure what the number is for FY24, but with what we have in the first budget adjustments for FY23, we are covered.
So we're on track to, the way it's been set out at the moment with this first budget adjustment, we're on track to have it covered.
Correct. And then we would just budget it through the process next year.
But it is still, the cost is still significantly above what was originally estimated and planned for.
Yes, sir.
What was the original plan number? Do you recall?
Well, when we went out to bid the first time, I believe the engineer's estimate was around 9 million.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Commissioner McKinney. Commissioner Hanson.
So there's one sidewalk, portion of a sidewalk that actually there's a couple places, but one I noticed in particular, it's between 13th and 14th. It's about a driveway. I think was the Dunkin' Donuts, I don't know what it is now. So the sidewalk right now is fairly wide and flat, but in order to, the design apparently will shorten it, but the driveway, because of its pitch, the actual sidewalk portion by the driveway that will be flat will be significantly narrowed. And we've seen that in a number of places. In order to get the minimum sidewalk and the minimum ADA, we sort of narrow it down. So that's one of the other trade-offs. Whenever you go down to the minimum of an ADA accessible sidewalk and then a driveway that goes down steeply in a heavily used pedestrian area, there's people with disabilities using that, you do run the risk that they will go into the driveway. So there's some sensitivity to that. I realize you have to meet the minimum, but right now the width, regardless of the fact that the sidewalk is not in great condition, needs to be replaced, the width is better than the minimum, but we will go to just the minimum in that location. Yes. And I think a couple of other places where the driveways, because we have to widen it, the pitch is going to be a little steeper.
Yes, Commissioner Hanson, I would venture to guess that driveway is not ADA accessible today. It will be after the project. There are street trees, so you have, additional sidewalk width for the street trees. So you have 5 feet behind a tree, and then this area behind the driveway is 4 feet, which still meets all ADA requirements.
That's the minimum 4 feet. So I just realized right now it's not, I think there's a really good way of moving forward on this. If we, I hope we reject the bid, move forward with 2 phases, which we should have done last year, address the safety issues, the concrete deterioration on those sidewalks, the ADA ramps, and then the bigger piece of repaving all the rest, with consistent designs. I think we can do that. And if we can get ped counts and projected pedestrian counts, before we meet again, that would be helpful, because we got traffic counts, but we aren't estimating the volumes, and I know that is the number one concern with the YMCA and the development of the property across the street from the YMCA is the
Yes,
volume
sir.
of people walking across.
Right, and all the intersections are fully signalized with all 4 PED APS, will be APS, will be LBIB right before PED if we can. Absent the 3 that we're doing enhanced pedestrian crossing, so every single intersection has a signalized pedestrian. So we will not have PED counts in a week or 2 weeks, but every single intersection has a signalized crossing for a pedestrian.
Except for those 3. Well,
They do have an RFB at all 3 of the other ones. Again, you can direct us to do those as full signalized intersections if you so choose. But 11th at the YMCA is fully signalized.
And just as an aside, I think sure, the other intersections that aren't fully signalized, that's a good discussion to have, because even with the again, my point is, even with fully signalization and having the ramps that we're required to improve, I just feel like, again, with the Y, right, there's more that we can do. We can go further. So I think at the minimum, we'll definitely delay this for another week, and we can 2 weeks, like 1 week and then another week, right? So, but I'd like to just meet with you offline too and learn more about some additional details that I think we weren't able to figure out today. And then again, Commission, please submit those questions to them too, so we can work through those things and we can have a really robust conversation in a couple weeks. So thank you, Diane. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
thank you for finally
Thank you.
scheduling this.